How stupid is this?
All right, guys. Well,
oh boy. Let me use a restroom 1 sec. Okay, what is this?
welcome to another episode. This is going to be a really great discussion between Ami Kozak and Dave Smith. I'm excited just to have two Jewish comedians.
The guy debating this.
To be funny. No. This video is not meant to be funny. No. But I'm simply making it to extend my deepest gratitude for Douglas Murray. Such a phenomenal job in the monk debates, taking on the sophistry and deception, utter lies of Mehdi Hassan and those like him of his ilk, spouting and spewing lies about Israel, about the conflict, about the Gaza, about Hamas. Wishing you, Douglas, a yasher koach, as we say, doing basically God's work. And you said on stage something very interesting. You said, who will protect the Jews? The Europeans? No.
Okay. He seems very special.
Because I will tell you one thing that has been lost in this Israel versus Palestine issue: Jewish humor. People used to be so funny. Jewish people used to be so funny they could take a joke. It was the one thing we had in common, the blacks and the Jews. But now all that's gone because people are way too serious. Well, I'm very glad that these two guests will be able to have what I hope to be a meaningful discussion. And if anything, what I want you to take away is that speech matters. More speech, not less. That's what we have coming up on Candace. All right, guys, I promised you we were going to have such a great discussion today. I'm very much looking forward to it because I've already had a discussion with these two individuals, and they were actually productive on this topic, and there has been a lot of nonsense and a lot of emotion, but I think that these two individuals are going to have a good discussion. I think it's also important to say, because you hear people say, oh, I'm moderating the discussion, I don't have an opinion. You guys already know my opinion. You guys know that I've had Dave Smith on and that I agree with him on foreign policy. So to keep this discussion productive, I'm just going to be as quiet as possible. Not an easy task for me. Not an easy task at all. But I want to make sure that we're not accidentally tipping the scales, and occasionally I'm just going to say bad and mean stuff to Dave Smith just to make it easy. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ken.
Occasionally, I'm just going to say, did she say something mean to Dave Smith? Is it?
Not an easy task for me. Not an easy task at all. But I want to make sure that we're not accidentally tipping the scales, and occasionally I'm just going to say bad and mean stuff to Dave Smith just to make it.
Oh, bad and mean stuff. Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Make it easy. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Candace.
Thank you, and congratulations on the success of the new show. It's awesome to see.
Whoop, whoop, we can't cancel Candace. So, Ami, I do want to start with you because you and I had an offline discussion about really how not productive my discussion was with other people that I had on the show, that I was not intending to. People were upset with me thinking that I had sort of intentionally had on like a rabid pro-Israel voice. I'm going after Rabbi Shmuley, and most people agree, left and right, that he's an interesting person, so to speak. And the truth was, I was really only having Rabbi Barkley on because he had personally written an article about me, not because I think that he's the most logical pro-Israel voice or that he gets it right all the time. I don't think he does. So I do want to offer you an opportunity right here at the beginning. We're seeing right now the media sort of saying that any critique of Israel as a foreign nation kind of registers as a critique of all Jews across the world, which makes it easy to call people anti-Semitic if they disagree with Bibi Netanyahu. So I just want to hear your take on that.
Sure, yes, thank you. I think that there's always a better way, I maintain, when there's disagreements to lend themselves to conversations and coming in good faith and understanding your opponent's positions actually what they've said before coming into any conversation. So there's conversations you've had since our conversation that I want to clear up, but also with regard to criticism, the idea that it's not that any criticism of Israel is being labeled as anti-Semitic, but the point is that there's a lot of disproportionate criticism, the singling out, the double standard that Israel's being subjected to. That is grounds for that, I do believe, and I think that there is a catch-22 that happens in the anti-Semitism game where someone can make an incendiary comment, an anti-Semitic remark, and then the Jewish community calls it out, and they say, well, you see, Jews are trying to control me. You see, they're trying to control the speech. And so it almost becomes an impossible task to combat effectively. And I said this in our last conversation that to call...
Just by the way, the real answer is, fuck, who cares about anti-Semitism? Just don't talk about it. It's not worth it. It's an auto optics L, and also you can't, to try to differentiate if somebody's being anti-Semitic or not, like in practice, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism basically looks the exact same. There's just no point in talking about it. Just deal with the talking points. I think the fixation on the anti-Semitic shit, unless somebody's being clearly anti-Semitic, like when Candace Owens is implying that Jewish people control pornography or whatever to get rid of white people, like Candace Owens is clearly an anti-Semitic figure, but most people are probably coming at it, at least from what I've seen, like from some kind of like anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist thing. Not everybody's like hates Jews like Candace does.
Sure, yes. Thank you. I think that there's always a better way, I maintain, when there's disagreements to lend themselves to conversations and coming in good faith and understanding your opponent's positions actually what they've said before coming into any conversation. So there's conversations you've had since our conversation that I want to clear up, but also with regard to criticism, the idea that it's not that any criticism of Israel is being labeled as anti-Semitic, but the point is that there's a lot of disproportionate criticism, the singling out, the double standard that Israel's being subjected to. That is grounds for that, I do believe, and I think that there is a catch-22 that happens in the anti-Semitism game where someone can make an incendiary comment, an anti-Semitic remark, and then the Jewish community calls it out, and they say, well, you see, Jews are trying to control me. You see, they're trying to control the speech. And so it almost becomes things that are not anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic is incredibly unproductive and wrong, and it's almost like a cry wolf scenario. But when we do see things that are anti-Semitic and we call it out, or problematic comments that embolden anti-Semitism, a catch-22 forms where I've seen it all over Twitter too, where people say disgusting things about Jews. They couch it sometimes in criticism of Israel, and no one can deny that there's a lot of anti-Semites that disguise themselves in anti-Zionist rhetoric, and they say these things, and then when the Jewish community calls it out because they say these Jews are trying to control our narrative, control our speech, then we call it out. They say, you see, and then proceed to double down, and it just continues to spiral. So it leaves the voices who want to speak out productively and constructively about this fairly stuck. And in a world post-October 7th, when we see a rise of anti-Semitic incidences simply because Israel is in a war, and then you see thousands of people, mobs of crowds in the street cheering Intifada revolution, Al-Qassam, here are your next targets, protesting at the Nova exhibit where Jews were slaughtered on October 7th. I was there 2 hours before that with a cohort of comedians visiting. When you're seeing these things, and then you see a rise of anti-Semitism, I think rhetoric that contributes to that, we need to be able to, open our ears and eyes to understand that being aware of these things and calling it out is not trying to control or censor, and it is a real thing, even though in the past it may have been an exaggeration.
What do you think, Dave?
Well, I guess I agree to some extent. I mean, I think that there's certainly, I see a lot of Jew-hating stuff on Twitter, and I do think that when you're Jewish, you kind of can't win. You make a fair point there. It's I've heard there was one thing that I got tagged in where it was a whole list of political commentators with the Star of David, behind it. And it was first off, they just got a bunch wrong. A bunch of people who just aren't Jewish were put on there. But then they had me and Glenn Greenwald and Max Blumenthal and a bunch of other people. And you're yeah, but we're all the sharpest critics of Israel. And they're yeah, but you see, that's the Jewish game. It's you control both sides of the, so it just becomes this thing where it's oh, okay, so if I was pro-Israel, that's proof that there's a Jewish conspiracy. If I'm critical of Israel, that's also proof that there's a Jewish conspiracy. So
this is the transcendental idea. Literally, no matter what you do, it's always proof. There's no such thing as disconfirming evidence, especially to anti-Semitic people, but generally far-right people in general, and also far-left people sometimes. There's no such thing as disconfirming evidence. If something is agreeing with you, it's because obviously you're correct. If it's disagreeing with you, it's controlled opposition. That's always the case every single time. There's no disconfirming evidence to any of the far-right conspiracy theories, especially when it comes to Jewish people.
Feeling on that is just kind of it's a losing game, and I find it stupid, and I totally don't like seeing that stuff. I do think that the difference is that these are kind of, for the most part, random Twitter comments, and it's hard to know what's really going on there. Is this somebody trolling? Is this a 15-year-old? I mean, I have no idea what it really is behind that. Whereas when it comes to actual people who are known, who are making these arguments, I just don't see almost anybody. I mean, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe there's someone I'm not thinking of, but I see people like Candace who, from everything I've seen, bends over backward to be hey, I am not talking about Jews here. I have nothing.
This is why I think it's so important. I've been on this a lot recently. I say it a lot to Alex O'Connor in our talk yesterday. It's so important whenever you give a theory or an idea about a thing, you should always ground it out in examples, or ask the person you're talking to ground it out in examples, because sometimes people can say a bunch of stuff that sounds good, and then when you hear what they say in practice, you're oh, we're not at all the same. So for him to go on that whole diatribe and then defend Candace is very funny in my opinion.
From everything I've seen, bends over backward to be hey, I am not talking about Jews here. I have nothing but love for Jewish people. I've grown up around Jewish people. That's what I see for the most part, that people that then still just get called anti-Semitic. And so, I do, where I would probably disagree a little bit is that I think the idea that if you are critical, look, Douglas Murray just had a debate at the Monk debate the other day. His argument is that being anti-Zionist is being anti-Semitic. And it's remarkable to watch people like Douglas Murray just become woke leftists. When they talk, anti-Semitism is a shape-shifting virus, and if you say anything critical of Israel now, you now own the entire history of hating Jewish people or something like that. The truth is that there definitely is more criticism of Israel than there are of other governments, other countries.
Far worse governments, too.
There are more what?
But the truth is that there definitely is more criticism of Israel than there are of other governments, other countries.
Far worse governments, too, I would say.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of reasons why that's the case, other than the fact that it's a Jewish state. And we could get in.
Yes, please get into it. I hope you've got something more than the United States funds their military a bit.
Into what all of those are, but
to be fair, I guess it's more than a bit. Is it 18%, 15% of their military budget comes from the U.S.?
Could talk about worse governments. There is something very unique about the relationship between the United States of America and Israel as it pertains to our foreign policy, particularly over the last 20 years, which has been catastrophic for not just our nation, but every nation involved. There's also something different about a war, which I hesitate to even use the word at times, because I'm not sure that's the correct word for what we've seen over the last 8 months. I don't know if I can think of another example around the world, again, correct me if I'm wrong, where a captive, permanently stateless refugee group of people are just being mass slaughtered. A group of people who do not have a military of their own, do not have a government of their own.
They do have a military of their own. Hamas is the representative of that area. They are the governing body, and Hamas's military is called the Al-Qassam Brigade. There's also other political parties there. The second largest one, I believe, is Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and they have a military as well, and it is called the Al-Quds Brigade. So I don't know what he means when he says they don't have a military. That is not true, but okay.
Are completely captive and have been ruled by Israel since 1967. That's also unique. And so I think there's a lot at work here. I'm not going to argue that people hating Jews is not an element at all amongst anyone. But at the same time, it's like if you are for border restrictions, you might attract some people who don't much like Mexicans. And if you're for DEI, you're going to attract some people who don't much like white people. And if you're critical of Israel, you also probably will attract some people who don't like Jews. All of this to me is kind of irrelevant to the real question, which is what Israel is doing to Gaza over the last 8 months, and whether or not this is acceptable, and whether or not we should be funding and arming this conflict.
Well, that's a great question, and I would love to hear Ami's response to it. You know, when you and I first spoke, Ami, it was only a few weeks, I think, after October 7th, and I think that we had a really great discussion. Somehow I was still called anti-Semitic after it, and I was going, I thought that was such a productive discussion. I learned so much, and I thought it was good and healthy for people to hear.
I was called a lot of things
side.
in the comments too, but fair enough.
Yeah, they just sort of like, I thought it did both of us a disservice. I was very proud of the discussion because I was coming from it in very good faith, and I know that you were as well. And so I think that much has changed. I think people were floating around, this is genocide. I don't think that matters. We don't need to get hung up on the verbiage. Do you believe that the response to the October 7th attacks has been equal, overboard, and also what would you say is an equal and overboard response?
Well, first of all, Dave, I'll just say, I know you wanted to debate Douglas Murray, but here you have him. It's the next best thing, okay? Everything Dave said is utter nonsense from the get-go. People of your ilk. But anyway, that's what happens when you get two comedians on to talk serious. Well, yes, for you, maybe. Anyway, I'm a huge Douglas Murray fan, and I think he did an awesome job. But further...
Saying Hamas is the government as if it's legitimate or comparable to any actual government on earth is fucking retarded. Are you serious? I can't tell if you're trolling or not. As if it's legitimate, well, Hamas won their elections, number one, so at least at one point in time they were legitimate. And then number two, they are the administrative body in the Gaza Strip. They run the services. They dole out money to people, they do the policing, they do all of the utilities. If that's not a government, what are they?
The record, I'll just say this. A couple of things just to what Dave said, and then I'll address your question, Candace, because I think, Dave, would you concede that this, you don't like the word war, I don't like the word conflict, because I think there's a fundamental flaw in presuming that Israel and its enemies are, and I'm using this word carefully, moral equals in terms of the values that Israel tries to uphold, the state it tries to create, which confuses me about your position in the sense that you're someone who's always fighting for individual rights and sovereignty, and that these governments, the whole purpose of government in and of itself is to protect those rights to the best of its ability. That's what its primary function is. And to the extent, to the degree to which Israel does that better than any other area in the region, I would think that at least morally...
I feel like this is such a dumb argument to go down. This is going to turn into like an apartheid debate on like the West Bank and the occupation or whatever. I just don't think this is even a relevant point to bring up. Like, it is a war. It is a conflict between two groups of people. Whether you want to call it a war, whether you want to call it international armed conflict, whether you want to call it non-international armed conflict, whatever you want to call it, is that the semantic distinction here is not relevant, I don't think.
Sympathetically, your solidarity or whatever you want to call it, your advocacy, your opinion on this would lie more so with what Israel has to go through because it's fighting regimes that do not share any of those values at all. Any of our values that are here today in terms of tolerance, individual rights, these kinds of things that Israel, although it's imperfect, is a Western...
He's going to disagree on all of these points and say, actually, Israel's like the worst government ever. They don't believe in any of these things.
Democracy. So it always shocks me when I see people who are principled in your position not see that or side with that. And I know you haven't fully condemned Israel fully, but and I've seen other interviews where you do defend what Israel's, the virtues of Israel. But at the same time, I always find that very surprising because the values that you uphold and say are fighting for on behalf of the Palestinians, it doesn't seem to me that their regimes that represent them and a lot of people in those populations don't uphold those values themselves or those desires themselves. So seeing it through a Western American lens, there's a hierarchy of values here, and it seems that the real motivating factor in this war is it's not a geographical or political dispute or a conflict that presumes two sides are fighting as moral equals, but rather an ideological one in which Israel is fighting regimes that are genocidal, that wish to see its destruction because it's a Jewish state, because of not just it as a Jewish state, but Jews worldwide, and they've been very explicit about that. So it confuses me that we impose this idea that everybody just wants the same thing, and we have to just work this out, as a geographical dispute with all of that messy history. What's always seemed to me been animating this before any occupation of any territory even existed was a deep-seated hatred for Jews, the Jewish people, and the Jewish state. So even if people critical of Israel aren't anti-Jewish, the people Israel's directly fighting certainly are.
Okay, that is interesting. So I only want to say that because I did have, and I'm interjecting here, I did have a conversation with someone whose parents.
Is she gonna debate with Dave against him? Why? No shot. Did she cut Dave off on like the first back and forth? Is that really about to happen?
Parents were forced out in, I want to say 1945. Is that the correct year?
48.
Sorry, I had to get water. Okay, my bad. The War of Independence and the Nakba was indeed 48. If you want to be really technical, you might be able to say 47, but it's okay. This is not relevant. It doesn't matter that much. It's not that important.
Whose parents were forced out in, I want to say 1945. Is that the correct year?
48, yeah.
And it definitely, I don't think every person that has an issue with Israel is being guided necessarily by this idea that it's just Jewish people. I mean, some of these people were actually living there and had accepted Jewish refugees into their home. One Palestinian is coming to mind, Mohammed Hadid, who they were allowing these refugees to live there for 2 years. They went out one day, came back, and the locks were changed. And they said, and this is, again, I'm telling you what Mohammed Hadid told me, you're not allowed to come back here. Your home is being taken over. If you come back, they will shoot.
What is this story? What is she even talking about right now? I don't know the story. Mohammed Hadid. You think it's with a J? What is this story? Where is this? Can anybody give me what she's talking about? Bella Hadid's dad. That's not, I'm just curious where is a time when...
This is, again, I'm telling you what Mohammed Hadid told me, you're not allowed to come back here.
So there was an Arab that was letting Jews, or there was a Palestinian letting a Jew live there for 2 years, and then it got reversed. What is this? Yeah, where is this? Okay, let's read this. I'm just curious what the context is for this. Okay, he was born in 48 in Nazareth. He's the son of Anwar Mohammed Hadid and his wife, Karia Hadid, and has two brothers. During the 47 and 49 Palestine War, Hadid and his family fled to Lebanon as part of the 48 Palestinian expulsion and flight. Who edited this article? I'm surprised this doesn't say the Nakba, but ultimately settling in Syria in 1989, Hadid stated his father left because he did not want the family to live under the Israeli occupation. We became refugees to Syria, and we lost our home in Safad to a Jewish family that we sheltered when they were refugees from Poland. On the ship that was sailing from country to country, no one would take them. They were guests for 2 years till they made us refugees, and they kicked us out of our own home. We became refugees here. Jewish family sheltered when they were refugees from Poland. That means that they would have come in the late 30s or early 40s. For 2 years, they wouldn't have made them a refugee in 42 or 44 or 46. Is this real? Can this possibly be real? The timelines just don't. That doesn't feel like they add up. Unless, did Jews take over some territory before 48? I don't think so. This isn't even that important. I'm sorry. I'm just. Holocaust survivors. Yeah, I can. So if somebody says we took in some Jewish refugees, that's possible. Because there were Jews that were coming from, Europe But I don't understand how they made them refugees 2 years later. That implies that they arrived in 45 or 46. And at that point, I think tensions were pretty bad. I wonder if they mean like their neighborhood took them in as refugees or something. He probably means the town took it. Yeah, that might make a little bit more sense. That we sheltered when they were refugees from Poland on the ship that was sailing. They were our guests for 2 years till they made us refugees, kicked us out of our own home. I feel like this is, I feel maybe the town or city. That would make more sense. But they wouldn't have come in 45 or 46. Those would have come far earlier, no? Hold on, I just want to see this. Explain why this makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense because Palestinians weren't made refugees until 1947 or 1948. Those were the two huge years where Palestinians were made refugees. But he's saying that they were only there for 2 years, meaning that these refugees would have come in either 45 or 46. But I can't think of when mass refugees or refugees were going to the Middle East from Poland in 45 or 46. It would have been like 5, 6, or 7 years earlier. I don't know if any came after the war. So the timeline doesn't add up. So like if he would have said, oh, we became refugees, they were here for 6 years, and then they made us refugees, then, oh, that makes sense. 2 years? What? What do you want? Okay. I don't know. Let me just hear him tell the story.
I'm a Nakba survivor. My parents were Nakba survivors. We were...
Somebody said, my father came as a refugee in 46. Would Arabs have let Jews live with them in 46 after all the revolts, after all the Jewish fighting, after the Peel Commission got rejected, after everything? I feel like at that point, maybe in the same city, but no way, like, close by. What is your problem? What? What do you want? Hi.
Happily living in Safad, my parents and their kids at the time. I was born in Nazareth, came back home to my home in Safad, returning after my mother had me in her father's home.
Also, wait, he was born in 48? In Nazareth, okay. Early, it must have been early 48. He was born in November. Oh. Okay, hold on.
Returning after my mother had me in her father's home. We were kicked out, locked us out. The people that we took in 2 years prior from the port of Haifa, where my father, my uncle, a few other friends of my father went to pick up some refugees that arrived to Haifa from Poland, that traveled the world and no one will take them. They ended up in our backyard.
I don't understand what that means. They traveled the world and no one would take them. I mean, if they would have been leaving anywhere at that point, they would have been going to Israel in 46. World War II and the Holocaust and all that shit was already, for the German side of shit. Fuck. I don't know when all of the... Were there huge waves of refugees? I just don't know. Hold on. I don't want to say he's lying because, I mean, like, there could be waves of refugees that I'm just not aware of. What?
They ended up in our refugees that arrived to Haifa from Poland.
He's 100% talking about the SS Exodus ship that landed in Haifa in 1947. Okay, I don't know anything about that. Let's read. The Exodus 1947 was a packet steamship that was built in the U.S. in 28 as President Warfield. for the Baltimore Steam. Served in the Second World War. It's barracks training ship for the British Armed Forces. Same to Exodus 1947 to take part in Aliyah Bet. She took 4,515 Jewish migrants from France to mandatory Palestine. Most were Holocaust survivors who had no legal immigration certificates for Palestine. The Royal Navy boarded her in international waters and took her to Haifa, where ships were waiting for to return the migrants to refugee camps in Europe. Okay. This might be what he's talking about then. Okay. Building, let's see. He's claiming to have picked up Jewish refugees. No fucking way. Yeah, I'm just curious. It just feels like the relationship between those two people wouldn't have had that happening. But I could be wrong. I don't know every single aliyah and every single event. Like there could just be a thing that I'm not aware of. Okay, hold on. Sorry, I'm clicking opening stuff. There's just a new thing to me. I've never heard of before. Okay. Jewish refugees. Okay, you keep spamming this in chat. Pretty sure he is giving a general narrative and not a specific anecdotal case. You're wrong. He is giving a specific case. Stop spamming this in chat. He's literally saying specifically this specific thing happened. He's giving time frames. He's giving years. He's giving like length of stay. Shut the fuck up. I don't know why you keep saying he's giving a general narrative. It's not true. Jesus. Okay. After World War II, about 250,000 European Jews are living in displaced persons camps in Germany and Austria. A Zionist organization began organizing an underground network known as the Brachach, I don't know what the fuck this is, escape in Hebrew, which moved thousands of Jews from the camps to ports on the Mediterranean, where ships took them illegally to Palestine. Because at this point, by the early 40s, I believe, it might have even been as early as 39. I think Britain basically capped Jewish immigration to, they either severely capped it, like at a very low level, or they made it so no more were allowed to go back to the mandatory Palestine area. So they had to ship them in illegally, I think, when they did. This is part of the Aliyah Bet immigration that began after the war. At first, many made their way to Palestine on their own. Later, they received financial aid and other help from sympathizers around the world. The ships were crewed mostly by volunteers from the U.S., Canada, and Latin America. Under Aliyah Bet, more than 100,000 people tried to illegally migrate to Palestine. The British government opposed large-scale immigration. Displaced person camps run by American, French, and Italian officials often turned a blind eye to the situation, with only British officials restricting movement in and out of their camps. In 1945, the British government reaffirmed its 1939 policy, was 39, limiting Jewish immigration, which it adopted after 250,000 European Jews arrived fleeing Nazism, and Palestine's Arab population rebelled. The British government deployed naval and military forces to turn back refugees. More than half of 142 voyages were stopped by British patrols, and most intercepted migrants were sent to internment camps in Cyprus, the Elite detention camp in Palestine, or to Mauritius. About 50,000 people ended up in camps, more than 1,600 drowned at sea, and only a few thousand reached Palestine. Of the 64 vessels that sailed in Aliyah Bet, Exodus 1947 was the largest. She carried 4,515 passengers, the largest ever number of illegal immigrants to Palestine. The story received much international attention. Ruth Gruber. Okay. Incident took place near the end. All Aliyah Bet ships were renamed with Hebrew names designed to inspire and rally the Jews of Palestine. On July 17th, Mossad Leila Bet renamed the ship Exodus 1947, and in Hebrew, Yetziat Tazbaz. Okay, don't care. Flight from refugees. After the biblical Jewish exodus from Egypt to Canaan, and the refugees raised a flag with the Star of Star of David. The name was proposed by Israeli politician, military figure Moshe Sneh, who at the time was in charge of illegal migration for the Jewish Agency. The name was later described by Israel's second prime minister, Moshe Sharett, as a stroke of genius. The name was later described by Israel's second prime minister. Okay, sorry. Ship left port. Okay. All right. Aliyah Bet. Damn, and Arabs protesting. I don't think the story is that unbelievable. The reason why it feels unbelievable is that Arabs would have been incredibly ass-pained at any kind of Jewish migration after 1939, because that was what the whole Arab revolts were for. After the Peel Commission comes and they say, listen, we think we should like split this place up because shit is fucked. The Arabs revolted and they were like, fuck you. We're not having another state here. This is bullshit. We wanted a state here. Only us. And they revolted. The Brits were like, okay, fuck it. We won't let any more Jew fuckers into the continent. So the idea that Arabs would see Jews coming in illegally and would like welcome them into their homes feels like very out of character for the time for that. It just doesn't seem like it would have. And the Jewish agency would have definitely been on top of that because their whole goal was trying to smuggle Jews into Europe. I mean, you just saw this. This guy was like a minister of like the illegal immigration part of the, sorry, I just want to listen to this guy talk about this. Fuck me.
I traveled the world and no one will take them. They ended up in our backyard. We loved them, my mother said. We fed them. We dressed them.
We'll love them, my mother said. This guy was born in 48. This guy would have been born after they even took these people in. He could be speaking like, well, she said this to other people there, I guess, but.
We made sure they're safe. When she came back to the gates of our home, they locked us out without allowing us to go in to take a single memory. I was 9 days old. She had to carry me alone with my sister. Carry me alone. 9 days old. She had to carry me alone.
Okay.
With my sister all the way to Syria. My uncle found my father and my other 2 sisters and my grandmother in a refugee camp out in the desert. A lot of unfortunate people kept and stayed behind in refugee camps all over the world. They were unfortunate. We made it safe. My saddest moments, I can say that my mother asked me to promise her that when she dies, we buried her with her parents in the cemetery in Nazareth. I did not do that one single thing.
I can believe that his family fled and stuff. But
Mother couldn't come back home.
Sorry, fuck. People are linking me. Apparently that other people have dug into this before. Hold on. This part. Real quick. The reason why I am being critical of this is because one of the myths of Palestinian history, one of the big myths, is this idea of we welcome them with open arms and this is how they treated us. Prior to 1948, I don't think it's very controversial to say that the majority of the violence was from Arabs to Jews inside mandatory Palestine. The idea that the Arabs welcomed Jews there with open arms is just absolutely not true. Now, did every single Arab fight every single Jew? No. But like there were massacres. There was a lot of like violence and fighting back and forth. Now, were they justified in it? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, you can argue that. But the idea that like we welcome them with open arms is just absolutely not true. Jews had to buy that land. Jews had to work that land. There were some Arabs that were expelled from land that Jews bought. There was like a lot of fighting over Jews coming in. There were huge protests about them coming in. It led to the whole revolts from Arab society of them coming in. Like, yeah. Let's see. This guy said, this is 3 years old. Muhammad Hadid, father of Bella and Gigi, straight up lies about his history. This is from Instagram. That's how we became refugees to Syria, and we lost our home in Safad to a Jewish family that we sheltered when they were refugees from Poland on the ship that was sailing from country to country, and no one would take them. They were our guests for 2 years till they made us refugees, and they kicked us out of our own home. Also, this like sailing from country to country and no one would take them is, I mean, like we can stretch that a little bit, but whatever. Sad story, isn't it? Only a few problems with it. First and foremost being that he's from Nazareth and not Safed. Of course, he couldn't claim that it happened in Nazareth because it's still an Arab city to this day. Yeah, that was... I also don't understand that. He said he was born in Nazareth. Does Safed not have a hospital? Safed is to the north, right? I think it's close to the Syrian border, I think. I don't think it's in the West Bank. I could be wrong on that. Oh, What am I looking for? Oh.
My name is Muhammad Hadid. A few other friends went to pick up some refugees that arrived to Haifa from Poland.
Sorry, hold on.
That traveled the world and no one will take them. They ended up in our backyard. We loved them, my mother said. We fed them, we dressed them, we made sure they're safe. When she came back to the gates of our home, they locked us out without allowing us to go in to take a single memory. I was 9 days old. She had to carry me alone with my sister all the way to my parents and their kids at the time. I was born in Nazareth, came back home to my home in Safed.
Maybe back then Saba didn't have a hospital, I guess. I don't know. Or one for delivering babies. I don't know. I'm trying to be charitable. Of course, he couldn't claim that it happened in Nazareth because it's still an Arab city to this day. There was no expulsion from there. Indeed, he was born 4 months after the battle for Nazareth when it already surrendered and became part of Israel. Secondly, Jewish refugees from Europe didn't wander in the land searching for a place to live. They were all settled by the Jewish agency. Even if they weren't, they wouldn't go to some Arab's house when there are hundreds of thousands of Jews living in the British Mandate. This ties to the false narrative that Jews suddenly appeared after World War II in an Arab-Palestinian state, which took them in, when the reality was there was no Arab-Palestinian state in Tel Aviv, a city founded by Jews, already had a population of 120,000 by 1936. I mean, they could have been settled in Arab areas, but I don't know what the population in 48 looked like of Safed, of northern, yeah. Another interview of him speaking about it in more detail.
Mr. Hadid, let's start with your own story, the story that your family passed down to you about the very early times of the occupation and actually where you were born.
Can I get a quick VOD split? Sure. Stop recording. Start recording.
I was born in Nazareth, Palestine, in 1948. I was born about 17, 18 feet from where Jesus was conceived. 2 years prior, my parents and a few other neighbors have gone down to the harbor saying that there are some refugees coming from Jewish families coming from Europe. Our house that we have...
I just don't understand this story. I've never heard of this before. If there's anything of this being told ever, I would love to hear about this. So I'm just thinking of the attitudes of the people that at the time, right? In 1946, the Arabs and the Jews were both inflamed. Like, tensions were huge. The Jews had been fighting against the British because they were asked out of the British. The Arabs had already lost their revolt. It was put down horribly by the end of 39. Arabs and Jews were eyeing each other like there was about to be a war, because as soon as the mandate expired, they knew that there was going to be a war, because nobody wanted the Jewish state to be there. The idea that Arabs would have walked to Haifa or gone to Haifa to look for Jewish refugees to bring them into their homes is just unbelievable to me. Why would you? I don't see it fitting into this time period. I don't understand this at this time period. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, every Palestinian would have been super on edge, hating any Jew in the area, and Jews wouldn't have trusted any of the Palestinians coming in after all the violence from them, and then after the limitations on immigration from the British, and them trying to like prepare for what they saw as like an inevitable war. I don't even know if a Jewish administration would allow. Yeah, I don't understand this. This doesn't seem possible. It just doesn't fit with my understanding of the attitudes at the time. Unless maybe there were small groups of people that did. I don't know. I've never.
It's coming from Europe. Our house that we have, we've had for hundreds of years. My parents and my uncles, and we surrounded us. We had two Jewish families that we picked up at the Haifa harbor. My mother's home was in Nazareth. When she had me, she went to her mother to have me. When she was about to have me, they go a month before. So I was there. I was born, and we went back. And I was 9 days old with my sister Sana, who was at the time about a year and a half, 2 years old. Went back to Safed. When we arrived to Safed, apparently Safed was completely or partially taken over by Jewish population. My mother came to the gates of our community, which was like more of a Hadid quarters, to get into the house, and we were locked out. And she asked.
Did he just say his mother's home was in Nazareth? Yeah, I don't understand, but I don't know. Okay.
quarters to get into the house, and we were locked out. And she asked if she can have a blanket for me, as it was getting a bit cold. And they wouldn't even let her into the house to take a single photo or album she wanted to take with her of her.
No, his grandmother? It sounded like he said his mother's house, but also visiting the grandmother. But yeah, I don't know. His wiki says he was born in November. The war was over. Safed fell in May. Yeah, but I think there was expulsions all the way up through 49. So I don't know what was going on in Safed exactly at this particular point in time. I don't know what was happening in every single city throughout all points in time. His mother's family's house. Yeah, that's probably what he meant. Okay, by 1948, the city was home to about 12,000 Arabs and 1,700 Jews. Mostly religious and elderly. Sorry, okay. On January 5th, 1948, Arabs attacked the Jewish quarter. I wonder what the source is for this. Martin, I don't know the author. Oh, okay. Routledge Atlas of the Arab-Israeli Conflict. In February of 1948, during the Civil War, Muslim Arabs attacked a Jewish bus attempting to reach Safed, and the Jewish quarter of the town came under siege by the Muslims. British forces that were present did not intervene. I think at this point, the Brits just didn't give a fuck about anything. They were just like, fuck this. According to Martin Gilbert, food supplies ran short. Even water and flour were in desperately short supply. Each day, the Arab attackers drew closer to the heart of the Jewish quarter, systematically blowing up Jewish houses as they pressed in on the central area. On April 16th, the same day that British forces evacuated Safed, this is all, now these are still months before his birthday, okay? So these are the Arabs that are welcoming in the Jews. The same day that British forces evacuated Safed, 200 local Arab militiamen, supported by over 200 Arab Liberation Army soldiers, tried to take over the city's Jewish quarter. They were repelled by the Jewish garrison, consisting of some 200 Haganah fighters, men and women, boosted by a Palmach platoon. I don't know. The Palmach ground attack on the Arab section of Safed took place on the 6th of May as a part of Operation Yiftach. This is the, in the 6th of May would have been when the war was like in full swing, I think, right? The first phase of the Palmach plan to capture Safed was to secure a corridor through the mountains by capturing the Arab village of Berea. The Arab Liberation Army placed artillery pieces on a hill adjacent to the Jewish quarter and started its shelling. The Palmach's 3rd Battalion failed to take the main objective of the citadel, but terrified the Arab population sufficiently to prompt further flight, as well as urgent appeals for outside help and an effort to obtain a truce. The Secretary General of the Arab League, Abdul Rahman Hassan Azam, stated that the goal of Plan Dalit was to drive out the inhabitants of Arab villages along the Syrian-Lebanese frontiers, particularly places the roads of Arab. According to Gilbert, the Arabs of Safed began to leave, including the commander of the Arab forces, Adib Shishakli, later Prime Minister of Syria. With the police fort on Mount Cannon isolated, defenders withdrew without fighting. The fall of Safed was a blow to Arab morale throughout the region, with the invasion of Palestine by regular Arab armies believed to be imminent. Once the British had finally left in 11 or 12 days' time, many Arabs felt that prudence dictated their departure until the Jews had been defeated and they could return to their homes. According to Abbasi, the exodus of the Arabs of Safed had 3 phases. The first was due to the departure of the British, compounded by the failure of an attack on the Jewish quarter and a disagreement between the Jordanian and Syrian commanders. The second was due to the fall of nearby Ain al-Zaytun, and the massacre the Jewish forces committed there. The third was due to the deliberate creation of panic by Jewish forces. The city was fully under the control of Jewish paramilitary forces by May 11th, 1948. This guy's story just doesn't seem to line up at all with anything that has happened here. But, sorry, let me...
Children when they were very young, or family pictures, or her pictures when she got married. So that's kind of painful, but what caught my attention is what happened this time, that people were traveling from Gaza out. It touched me because I felt so attached to it because of what my mother have gone through. I didn't realize it because I was a child. I was a 9 days old child, but so I wasn't really I didn't even understand what happened. I didn't even know how we got from Safed to the refugee camps in Syria, and then on to in our life to.
Why do you keep saying this? Why do you retards keep saying this? To be fair, it does seem like it's just what he was told from his relatives. I don't know why you keep saying this. How many retards in my chat keep repeating this? Did you know, by the way, did you know that Hitler actually flew and shot laser beams out of his eyes? And he killed people that way in World War II. Did you know that? Did you know that? That really happened. That really happened. That really happened. If I were to tell you that 50 million times and you would say, why are you saying that? This is obviously not true. And I say, oh, my grandpa told me. Why? I don't know why you keep saying this retarded fucking thing of it seems like his parents said it. History books exist. Records exist. Other sources can be consulted. Just because somebody told you something doesn't mean it's fucking true, you fucking retard. Why do you keep saying this in my chat? I feel like I've seen this message 20 times. Jesus.
To Damascus and so on. So this is when I saw that it touched me deeply to see how difficult my mother had to go through to get me alive, to at least to a refugee camp.
I think they were saying it because of the fact that he was lied to. Okay, he's not 9 years old. He's an adult.
Your daughters, Bella and Gigi, they shared their opinion about what happens in Palestine on their social media, and they look sensitive on the matter as well.
My kids always have followed their intuition when it comes to human torture, to human nature, what happens to the humans on Earth, from the disaster in Turkey to the famine.
No shit, they're saying he's wrong, but not malicious. What do you mean not malicious? He's using his story to galvanize support against a country. It's a politicized story. You better be right on the facts. What the fuck are you talking about? This particular story is being used to further a lie, okay? Not to choose sides or say one side was right or wrong, but it's being used to further the Palestinian lie that they welcomed Jews with open arms right up until the Nakba, and they magically got expelled for no fucking reason, okay? That's not true. That's a myth of history that some people are interested in spreading, and he's using what appears to be a fake story that is personal to him as evidence of that to further that narrative. That's bullshit. What do you mean? You don't get a free pass on any part of that for any reason. If he was saying this like a personal conversation or something, then sure, maybe. But like, if you're gonna use this story, like I don't know, like my family's fucking background, like 100%. So I don't bring it up much. But if I was going to start to use like my mom's background or my dad's background and say like, oh, this is why this and that and that and that, then yeah, of course, you better believe I'm going to go and I'm going to verify 100% like if this is true or not. I'm just going to use it and weaponize it when I don't even know the actual facts of the matter. Unless there's some conclusive evidence his parents lied or the events couldn't have happened, how is he liable for it? Because a reading of history would tell you that it seems like that's not possible. If somebody tells you that, like, my mother, one of the saddest things about my birth was that my mother was carrying me, running away from a Nazi soldier that shot and hit my father at the back of the skull and killed him as she was fleeing, the Nazi soldier. And it was tragic, and that's why I never saw my father. And by the way, I was born in like 1948. What do you mean? What Nazis are shooting at you in 1948? This doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? The timelines matter. They're relevant. They're important. You can't just make up like things that happen that don't fit into time for what fits.
In Africa and the homelessness in Southeast Asia. They have been involved in these things over the years, building schools through UNICEF and so on. So it's always been a humanitarian issue in their blood, nothing to do with just being Palestinian. Palestinian just happen to be that their blood is, they're half Palestinians and they feel very close to the Palestinian cause. They heard about my story.
Do you or your daughters, because of your position in the Palestinian issue, get any criticism or blowback from your ideas or views?
We get threats. We have, I get a lot of hate mail. They actually published our phone numbers online, and we start getting hate phone calls and threats, from death threats to major attacks. And they lash at us, and we have to change our numbers and so on. So it's very painful to see that from people who are the only people that took them.
Couldn't both be true? Some areas of Palestinians accepted them while others rejected them. Knowing the truth of it will help us come to a better understanding. It depends on the timelines, my dude. Yeah, yes, that did happen, but I think that was mainly earlier on, and it depends on the city that you're talking about. The facts matter. If you like what you're saying doesn't make any sense. It's like things that make sense if you don't know what's being spoken about. Like Like when I played TV, when I played TVP, like the way that I would always counter it when the opponent was building a lot of immortals was I would make like marine hydralisks and then I would go out and fight. And you're saying like, well, hydralisks do counter them, right? And like marines are built by Terrans, and like that makes sense, Steven. Like, why are you so upset about this? And it's like, because Terrans can't build hydralisks. What do you mean? It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit into the stories, right? If he was talking about his parents like in the 20s, his grandparents in like the 20s or in the early 30s, I think that these are more believable. So for instance, and I'm not familiar with all the history here, like there was a big massacre of Jews in Hebron, okay? And part of the way that the Jews survived in Hebron, the ones that did, was because they were sheltered by other Arabs against the Arabs that were trying to kill them. So that would make sense. If you're saying, oh, in the 20s, like my family were some Arabs that sheltered Jews that were being massacred. Yeah, that did happen, where it was Arab on Arab, like protecting Jews. That did happen at points in history. But in 48? 47, 48, mid-late 40s, you're past a point where the tensions between these two groups have like boiled over. I don't know why two Palestinians would go to Haifa to look for Jewish refugees and then take them back to their Arab city. Why would they want to do it? Why would the Palestinians in their city want them? Why would the Jews want to go with them? And why would the Jewish agency let them go? And why would the Jewish people in Israel or pre-Israel let them go? None of that makes sense to me. Now, there might be a particular thing that I'm just not aware of. I'm not saying that sarcastically. Maybe there was like an event or something. I just didn't know. There's like a secret underground railroad of Arabs taking it. But the history right now doesn't fit broadly into anything that I've ever heard in my entire life. But again, there might be something I don't know about. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I was looking for. Oh, there was a massacre in Safed. Uh-oh. It probably would have been of Jews then, right? Well, maybe not. I could be wrong. But I'm just from population. But let's see. I don't even know what this website is, okay? The Safed massacre of 1929. There was a Hebron massacre in 29 as well. Crazy. What a year. Late in the year of 28, however, the relationship became not just rocky, but downright violent, becoming minor scuffles between the two groups. The subject of these disputes was focused on the right of the Jews to pray at that famous remnant of the Jewish temple, the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Mayhem ensued in 29 when Haj Amin al-Husseini incited Arab hatred by stating the Jews had placed Arab mosques and other holy Muslim sites in danger. The Jews held a march in the Jewish city of Tel Aviv on August 14th, 1926. 6,000 Jews chanted the words, "The wall is ours." On the 15th, hundreds of Jews descended upon the Western Wall to demonstrate in support of their right to worship there. The next day, Friday, August 16th, an inflammatory sermon was preached, resulting in a rally cobbled together by the Supreme Muslim Council. The demonstrators approached the wall where they burned prayer books and the notes of Jewish supplicants placed by tradition into the cracks of the wall. Friday, August 23rd, the violence moved outside the confines of Jerusalem to many other parts of the country as bands of Arabs attacked the Jews. In many locations, the mobs were joined by Arab policemen. Attacks on Jews in the city of Tel Aviv were well defended by armed Jews, while Hebron suffered the worst with the cruel slaughter of 67 Jewish men and women. In Safed, 18 Jews were killed. Altogether across the country, there were 133 Jewish deaths, more than 300 injured. A resident of Safed at the time of the massacre, David Hakohen, had been away at the time of the slaughter, reaching the city 2 days later. He believes he was one of the first to arrive in the city from the outside in the aftermath of the pogrom. Remembers that the official statement released by the British said that the disturbances had broken out on August 29th at 6:15, that the army arrived by 8:35, and the order restored was being... Okay. Okay.
Men, which Palestinians, they took these families into Palestine to make a state out of their state, while others were from death threats to major attacks, and they lashed at us. We had to change our numbers and so on. So it's very painful to see that from people who are the only people that took them in, which Palestinians, they took these families into Palestine to make a state out of their state, while others were online and we started getting hate phone calls and threats, from death threats to major attacks, and they lashed at us. We had to change our numbers and so on. So it's very painful to see that from people who are the only people that took them in, which Palestinians, they took these families into Palestine to make a state out of their state, while others were expelling them from Europe into Palestine.
I don't understand what he's saying.
I
have to slow down. I'm sorry. It's an ESL thing.
These families into Palestine are the only people that took them in, which Palestinians. They took these families into Palestine.
Okay, I understand. Okay. All of this is a lie. The entire story is probably a lie. This is a useful tool to spread the myth of the graceful Palestinian that took in the Jews, and that's where the initial Jews came from. Okay. That's what he's doing here. Okay. I understand now. This is the meme. I got it. Okay.
To make a state out of their state, while others were expelling them from Europe, and from Germany to Eastern Europe, Spain, everywhere else. Yet we took them in, and we invited them into our homeland. And I feel, I always felt very uncomfortable, but it's not. Apparently, this is an agenda they have, which is the propaganda that somehow we are the evil, which we're actually the opposite is true. That we were the kindest of the people who were there when they needed us most.
And when people start to speak about Palestine, anti-Semitism, especially in the West, is a big deal. What do you think of anti-Semitism?
Well, the word is a European phenomenon. They use it
He's going to do the we're all Semites.
themselves, anti-Semitism, because that was what they used to use in Eastern Europe and the West against anybody that came from that part of the world, which is I'm Semite, so I cannot be anti-me. So
just kidding.
They never can say
it.
I'm anti-Semitic because I am Semitic origin. I was born in the land of Galilee. I was born in the land of Jesus. I was born in the land of where Moses came to from Egypt. So it's not like and where we Abrahamic family, they were cousins. We always felt that the Jews and the Jews, we have to learn Judaism as Muslims. We learned the Torah, we learned the Christianity as the Bible, and then we became.
I've never heard that before. Maybe that was the case for some Islamic education. That's the first time I've ever heard that Muslims studied other holy books. That sounds intuitively, that feels very wrong to me, but maybe, I don't know, I've never heard that before.
Muslim by learning the Quran. The three religions came together. They might not feel that way, that they have their own God, but we believe that we have one God and one God for all the three religions. So we cannot be anti-them and they can't be anti-us.
Being a refugee, born a refugee, since then, what is the most painful thing that you remember?
The most important, my mother at one time, her wish was to be buried next to her mother's body graveyard in Nazareth, and we couldn't get her to go there. They wouldn't let us take her body there. And the same thing with my father, and the same thing with my grandmother. My grandmother, she wanted to be as close as possible to Palestine. We buried her on the island of Rhodes in a mosque graveyard that my great-grandfather's brother have built in Rhodes. So that's as close as we can to have her close to Palestine. And so she died, and we buried her there. My mother, she was buried next to my father in Arlington, Virginia. So these are
that's the history of the Quran. Yeah, but I feel like that's cheating. Could I as a Catholic say, oh yeah, we also kind of studied Judaism as well because we did the Old Testament? Does that really count?
Very painful times for me, as I wish I can be buried where I was born. And these kind of things can never happen. No one should be allowed to feel that pain that he cannot never come back home where he was born or never come back, dead or alive.
Okay. Sorry. Jesus. What a rabbit hole. What is this? Blog. Oh, wait. Was there anything more to this Reddit post? Oh, no, we read all that. Beware of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Mohammed Hadid's polemic on his Palestine. 32 minutes. Oh, my God. Mohammed Hadid is an LA-based celebrity real estate tycoon known for developing a string of Ritz-Carlton hotels as well as impressive buildings across the Middle East. Wait, really? Including high-end residential homes in the largest infinity pool in the world. He's also the father of two famous models. Oh, Gigi and Bella Hadid. Oh, you guys mentioned that. I don't know who these people are. He likes to build out Israel just as much as he enjoys building grotesquely opulent mansions for the rich and famous. Okay, Jesus. Okay. This lady sounds like a hater. But not to say that she's right or wrong, but So Fed Jewish community was comprised nearly of all Jews from the old Yeshuv, including Mustarib Jews who were never out of this place. What is this bullshit? Refugees from Poland. Also, Safed Arabs didn't shelter Jews. They conducted massacres on them, including in 29, where they burned Jews in their homes. In 47, they put old Jewish neighborhoods under siege. ALA, Arab Liberation Army commander, said that the extinction of Jews will be here soon. They bombed the quarters with mortars and bombs on the hills above the Jewish neighborhoods. Then when they entered the city, they would blow up the houses of the Jews over their heads. Jesus. It was only when the Haganah came to defend the city did the Jews here survive. This is their telling. I think this is generally true, though, based on what we just read, but okay. Okay, we're done with this guy. Sorry. This is another post of his on Instagram. Johns Hopkins genetic study shows 97.5% of Judaics living in Israel have absolutely no ancient Hebrew DNA, are therefore not Semites, and have no ancient blood ties to the land of Palestine at all. What is a Judaic? So wait, so then he doesn't believe that they're Semites like him. Jesus Christ. Okay, sorry. Anyway, so that's who. Cool. So that's who Candace Owens is talking to. Glad we could check that out real quick to get a story. Okay. My God. Sorry. 30-second break.
But what I want to do and what I will do is you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically as part of your diploma a green card to be able to stay in this country. And that includes junior colleges too. Anybody graduates from a college, you go in there for 2 years or 4 years. If you graduate or you get a doctorate degree from a college, you should be able to stay in this country.
Folks.
Holy fucking based? Yeah?
It makes absolutely no sense, by the way, that we...
Wait. What's going on here? Robot Biden?
Folks, it makes absolutely no sense, by the way, that we send home 40,000 engineers and scientists who earn a PhD in our university every year, and we send them back home. We should be stapling a green card to each and every one of those degrees as they walk across the stage.
Okay. Jesus, sorry.
Who, they were allowing these refugees to live there for 2 years. They went out one day, came back, and the locks were changed. And they said, this is, again, I'm telling you what Mohammed Hadid told me, you're not allowed to come back here. Your home is being taken over. If you come back, they will shoot you and kill you. So I think some people are being motivated by what they perceive to be the historical injustice. Do you think that that's a fair assessment to say that some people aren't just looking at this as these are the Jews, or looking at this as these are people who took our homeland? And it's
okay. Well, either of these guys have the historical context to question this story or know that this guy is full of shit. You can either know the general, that the story is sus, which is how I sussed it out, or you can know the specific. I guess some people know the guy specifically and know that the story is likely not true. Let's see. Here we go.
It's not fair. Or do you think it's changed over the years?
I think what's always fundamentally, not like there are marginal issues and there are fundamental issues, and I'm not denying that innocent Palestinians suffered as a result of all this. And I think, you could play a suffering Olympics all day long and keep going back and keep playing this game all day over atrocities that have been committed across the board throughout history. That's not unique to the foundations and formings of any state. But I think that as far as what's fundamental here.
Okay. So neither, but his response is still okay. You can find a lot of tragic stories through history. They don't really justify anything for the modern day. But
is not that there's this thirst and desire to create a Palestinian state, but rather to destroy the Jewish one.
Dave?
Okay, let me address a bunch of that stuff. So I think, look, when you say, okay, so like I'm a libertarian and I believe in freedom and government should, if it exists.
Are you a libertarian? And you don't know what the nap is, my friend?
When you say, okay, so like I'm a libertarian and I believe in freedom and government should, if it exists at all, only be there to protect property and natural rights. So, look, if you were to say, like, let's compare the United States of America to Saddam Hussein's Iraq, which society would I rather live in? Which society do I think is more moral? Which government, was less oppressive? Okay, obviously the answer is the United States of America, or at least to its own people. We're probably a lot more oppressive to other countries. But that's totally irrelevant to whether I'd have solidarity with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. The question is, who's right in this conflict? Were you justified in invading and destroying and killing 1 million people there? And the answer is no. And so it doesn't matter. Like, it's just...
Wait, I'm so sorry. I don't know what he's talking about. Who are the 1 million people invading and destroying and killing? Is he including people that were expelled? I'm guessing he's including people that were expelled, but the phrasing of that made it sound like destroying and killing. 2 out of 3 of those implied death.
And destroying.
Oh, wait. Or is he talking about Iraq? The 1 million people for Iraq, I think, is also not a true number, but okay. He's still talking about Iraq. Okay.
Killing 1 million people there. And the answer is no. And so it doesn't matter. Like, it's just totally irrelevant to the conflict. Now, it's not irrelevant to how you feel about the country as a whole, but if you're talking about the war in Iraq, I'm not going to go like, well, George W. Bush is not as brutal as Saddam Hussein, therefore I have some solidarity with him. It's like, no, he's destroying a nation of people. He has no right to do this. And by the way, he's also greatly degrading my country. Now, as far as the rest of your characterization of Israel...
Remember, if you're ever confused as a person in Europe or any other part of the world, for America, we, for the last 80 years of our country, we were involved in 2 foreign policy events. It was Iraq and Afghanistan. That's literally it. That is the definition of all U.S. recent foreign policy and recent and medium recent history. That's everything, and everything we do in the future for at least another 20 years will basically be another Iraq and Afghanistan. That is the extent to everything we've been involved in. It's all of our foreign policy. All of it is just Iraq and Afghanistan. That's it. Before that, it was Vietnam. That's it.
I think it's totally unfair and not in line with the history, and it's kind of circular reasoning. Like, you're like, well, but don't you know, Israel's the good guy, so how come you don't support the good guy? Wouldn't you be more sympathetic to them because they're the good guy? It's like, well, no, but look, Israel is not a Western democracy. They're just not. And they don't get to play this card anymore. Israel took control of the West Bank and Gaza.
Israel is absolutely a Western-style democracy. You can say that you don't like it for whatever reason, but if you look at the fact that they do elections, that they've got like a representative parliamentary body, that they've got like multiple parties, that they have like some sort of like guaranteed rights for their people. They don't have a constitution, but like generally speaking, like Israel is a Western-style democracy. Literally by definition, by founding of the state, and by the composition of how the state runs, it's a Western-style democracy. You can say there's corruption. You can say you don't like it for a variety of reasons, whatever. But like to pretend that it's not. It's just like, it's such a virtue signal.
In 1967, look, Israel is not a Western democracy.
I'm gonna get triggered. I haven't psychologically recovered from Candace being like, yeah, they were expelled in 45. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm sorry. All these conversations are starting to trigger the fuck out of me so much. He's about to give some really bad history, I can tell. Oh, it's okay. I'm ready for it. Come on. Let's go.
They're just not. And they don't get to play this card anymore. Israel took control of the West Bank and Gaza in 1967. They haven't occupied them for a few months after a war or even a few years after the war. They've occupied them for nearly 60 years, for longer than the Soviet Union occupied all of Eastern Europe. And none of the people in those territories have any voting rights whatsoever. So how can you call yourself a democracy? By the way, I'm not that into democracy.
Okay, we didn't touch on many facts. Okay, technically everything he said is technically kind of correct. In East Jerusalem, which was part of the West Bank, although now Israel's annexed it, those people technically have voting rights, or some of them do. But broad strokes, he's correct here, so we'll give it to him. Okay.
I don't really care about voting rights. My beef is that they have no natural rights whatsoever. But you don't get to just hold 5 million people captive for nearly 60 years with no voting rights and claim to be a democracy. That's an apartheid regime. And so I don't listen. The fact is, and many, just to your other point, because there were a few there,
Sure.
Many Israelis at the highest level of government have admitted this for many, many years, from Moshe.
Oh, he's going to say they don't want a Palestinian state.
Many Israelis at the highest level of government have admitted this for many, many years, from Moshe Dayan to Barak, all up and down. Bunch of former prime ministers who admitted. It was Ehud Barak who said, if I was a young Palestinian, I'd be a terrorist too. And it's not because they are just...
I don't know what that was supposed to prove, but okay.
All possessed by evil and Jew hatred. The truth is that the creation of Israel, however you feel about it, involved 750,000 Palestinians being kicked off of their land. And then after 1967, they've been occupied by a foreign military ever since. It is the...
They were occupied by a foreign military ever since 1948. Nobody ever cares about that. They were occupied by the Jewish one from 67 onwards. I know nobody cares, but...
most human thing in the world that you would develop hatred for the people who did that to you. There is no group of people anywhere, including the three of us, who would not develop a burning hatred for the foreign military that is policing your streets, kidnapping your people whenever they feel like it, killing your people with zero consequences.
This is true. There's no way to look at the Palestinian situation and not feel sympathy for the Palestinians. This is like the huge thing that Israel needs to, one of the reasons why I need to figure this shit out. Like, it is a pretty fucked situation. And regardless of the reasons or the facts, it really doesn't matter. It just looks fucked and it feels fucked. And anybody's going to look at it and say that is fucked. So,
I mean, imagine this government. Look, the Likud party, Benjamin Netanyahu's party, which is
their foundation. It's always like the same, like three talking about. Their foundation says that they will only recognize one state from river to sea, and that's the only sovereignty they'll recognize is Israel.
He's the longest-serving prime minister in the history of Israel. Was founded by who? Menachem Begin, a literal terrorist.
What an unbelievably weirdly reductive way. Sorry, that's the guy that signed peace with Egypt. I mean, obviously, his life is crazy, but okay.
That's what Israel did with their terrorists. They elected them prime minister.
And who was Arafat? Sorry.
Who wouldn't? How could you possibly live in Gaza or the West Bank and not hate Israel?
Okay. Can I respond? Sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot there. I mean, I appreciate we're letting each other go for a little while because I appreciate your perspective. But you mentioned the word invasion. And if we bring it to here and now and we talk about what happened on October 7th, because we are talking about this current military campaign, just to kind of hone in on specific points in history from it, because we can deliberate all of the history that you mentioned and alluded to, and it can take up 3 hours. But if we're just talking about here and now, right now, and trying to solve these problems, on October 7th, who invaded who? And did they invade occupied territory, or did they invade sovereign kibbutzim of individuals and deliberately target their civilians because they were Jews? Let's remember, the terrorist that called his parents on October 7th, and they have an audio recording of it, saying, Mommy, Mommy, Daddy, Daddy. He didn't say, I got our house back, I got our property back. Guess what? I liberated Palestine. He said, Mom, Dad, I killed 10 Jews with my bare hands. And they scream in pride and elation. They took Israeli babies that are still being held hostage today. The reason they're doing it is they're animated by Jew hatred. And I think to be naive to that is incredibly dangerous, and it misses the entire motivation behind what Israel's facing. This occupation of these places that you mentioned, first of all, Israel leaving Gaza in 2005, 2006, leaving it to every effort, in other words, for Israel to give land back and minimize what you call the occupation, which I think is a false term, and we can talk about that, because occupation refers to...
Oh boy, this guy is on the wacky side of things. Oh boy.
One sovereign nation illegally occupying an existing sovereign nation, of which there was no such thing when it came to Palestine. I know the geography was called Palestine, and I say that just as a point of preference to say that a lot of the language in this conversation is deceptive. It's not just a propagandistic talking point, but I think saying terms like that gives people this false narrative impression that a sovereign state of Palestine that was independent and had its own leadership and its own independence was usurped by Israel in what you alluded to today, leaving out what actually happened in the formation of Israel, in that the refugee crisis was largely caused by the fact that a lot of the Arab nations did not want the creation of a Jewish state. And
this is true. People always bring up the Nakba as like this random event in history that like it happened and then out of nowhere, like a bunch of people were expelled, but it was a result of the war, right? Nobody seems to know there was a war happening at that point in time. They just know like the Nakba, that's it.
Sought to destroy it upon its formation. And so we can't just start the story in the middle. So fundamentally, you can say it's the occupation that's leading to all this terrorism. And I know you're not excusing the actions of the terrorists, that some people have tried to throw your way. I'm not saying you're saying that, but you're saying that there's a context here. And I would say, yeah, it didn't start on October 7th, but it didn't start in 67 or 48 either. There were massacres of Jews in the 20s in Hebron. There were massacres and tensions between these two people and hatred going on in the Islamic world going back to the beginning. If you go to protests today and you hear chants in Arabic, they're not saying two states side by side, liberation for the West Bank for a free state of Palestine alongside Israel. They're saying Khaybar, Khaybar, Yar Yahud. And what is that reference to? Khaybar, Khaybar, Yar Yahud? The Battle of Khaybar, in which Muhammad came across the Jews and he gave them a choice: convert to Islam or submit and become dhimmis and second-class citizens. And this is what's animated the entire region and the expulsion of Jews throughout all of the Arab countries in the Arab world. And so the need for a sense of Jewish safety in the region, I think, is super important and not to be discounted. And my fundamental point is that I do not think it's occupation that leads to terrorism. It's terrorism that leads to occupation. In other words, the only reason these things perpetuate is because Israel is continually attacked. And if you want the solution to stop, you have to have goodwill on the Palestinian side to commit to not wanting to kill the Jews in Israel and attack them. And I think leaving Gaza in 2005 was a perfect example of that. What did happen? I know you've heard these points before, Dave, that greenhouses and infrastructure were left there. Hamas takes over, kills their political opponents, fellow Muslims, Fatah, and establishes a terrorist statelet using all the international aid and funding to fire rockets and attack at Israel, invade Israel on October 7th, breaking a ceasefire. So accountability, I'm not denying suffering of what you're talking about for local populations, but who's accountable for that? And at a certain point, you can't say Israel is.
Okay, so thank you so much. And I want to ask a question back to you, Ami. Dave, I know you're going to have a lot to respond to with that, but again, I want to be very clear. Of the three of us, I know the least about the history, which is why I think it's important to let you two talk. Ami, I do keep hearing this point over and over again that... Okay,
at least she says that. I'm okay. I'm more okay with her. She doesn't pretend to be an expert on it or whatever. That's fine. Okay, I can handle that. That's okay.
It wasn't a state, meaning this was just some territory, but people lived here, and my family is St. Thomian, and I just think, they've lived in generations upon generations in St. Thomas. It's not officially a state, it's a U.S. territory. So is your thought process, I guess we're talking about Puerto Rico, or we're talking about St. Thomas, that if the U.S. wanted to right now, they could say, hey, we're giving St. Thomas to Jewish people in Israel, give up your houses, we're not going to give you any money, get out or you'll get shot. And then your thought process is, hey, listen, you're not a nation. Like you're not a nation. No. It's like this. I know you've been living here for a long time. Could you clarify that? Because I don't want to misrepresent.
I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying I think the whole essence of creating Israel in a 1947 partition plan was that there were native peoples living there, Jewish and Arab alike, and no one disputes that native people live there. I'm simply dispelling a false narrative, and I think a lot of people fall into that who aren't informed on this issue when you talk to people, that there was this prosperous, free, independent state of Palestine with its own sovereignty. not in the context of under a British mandate and previously under an Ottoman Empire, and at a time when the whole region was being carved up by the...
He's dodging a little bit. She's saying even without a state, it still feels shitty to get kicked out of your home, right? Which is true, but maybe he'll get there.
Western powers, and figuring out what to do with the native peoples where there was tension. I'm not disputing that they were present, but I'm saying it to be very precise in getting the history right, because I think it's often misrepresented, and I don't know what Dave feels about that, but I'm being very particular and narrow in specifying that, because I think a lot of this conversation about this topic is so co-opted by false words and language that's very confusing and deceptive.
But you would agree that telling people that have purchased a home and are living there irrespective of the politics that they have to get out without even giving them money, because I actually was very surprised to learn they didn't get anything in return. I thought maybe they wrote them a check and were like, get out. I think we would all principally agree that first thing is wrong morally. Do you agree with that or not really?
Yeah, I can understand that position, but I'm just saying at the time, the reason for a refugee crisis, and we can debate the history and our accounts of this, is that if you accept that there's also a Jewish legitimate claim to the ancestral homeland in Israel and a priority to create a Jewish safe haven for Jews, given what had happened to Jews historically in Nazi Germany and the Arab world, not at the expense.
This is the worst argument ever. None of this matters. You should have just said the refugee crisis came in the middle of a massive war where 7 Arab states all declared war on Israel in a war of extinction. That's the answer. And the expulsion of Arabs in the area was because they were worried. There was a lot of conflict. A lot of them fled because of massacres they'd heard about, some real, some imagined. A lot of them were kicked out of their villages by Jewish fighters who were worried they would become future combatants. Like, this is the answer, not anything about historic homelands. He's giving like the worst answer, I think. What percentage were kicked out with no compensation? Prior to 48, my understanding is every bit of land that was purchased where Arabs were kicked off, those people were all compensated. Now, the compensation requirement was low, but they were compensated. After 47, I don't think anybody was compensated. They were just, if they fled, they fled. If they were expelled, they were expelled. I don't think any of them were given anything for that.
Of local populations and to displace them. The reason they were displaced is because of a refusal to accept a Jewish state and Jewish sovereignty, and what followed were attack after attack after attack from the surrounding...
Oh, he kind of got there. Okay.
Arab nations with the aim of destroying the Jewish state, not with the aim of creating free Palestine.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that, and I want to let you, Dave, now reply. I know, sorry, he said a lot, and then I just wanted to, because I'm learning with you guys, so I'm kind of going to ask questions.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, as far as the idea that there wasn't a Palestinian state, I do find this to just be one of the weakest arguments. I mean, human beings have natural rights. This is the foundation of Western civilization, is that your rights are not derived from whether or not you have a government, and that people were there. People were living in those homes. They had homesteaded the area. They had property rights. They had natural rights, and they were violently evicted from the place that they had been living for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And
thousands of years. Careful with that one, because you're going to run right into the the Jewish kingdom of Israel. When he argues about these, I don't know. Libertarian arguments are dumb. I don't know.
That's wrong. And
also, keep in mind too that even when you go back hundreds and hundreds of years, like you're talking about caliphites that were all established through conquering and conquest and everything as well. But whatever.
There's really no dispute here, because even if some of them just fled, which is true, some of them fled, some of them were violently evicted, some of them fled because they saw how violently evicted others were, but they weren't allowed to return, and Israel had no right to do that.
But Dave, do you agree that there didn't exist? Just to get clarification, do you agree that there didn't exist a sovereign state of Palestine in the way we recognize countries today?
Yeah, but that's not even a debatable point. Yes, that's true.
I think a lot of people think that. I think a lot of people do think that.
But I'm saying I think it's completely irrelevant.
I understand.
Yes, it's true that there wasn't a sovereign government known as Palestine. They were ruled by the British under the League of Nations mandate, and then before that, for 400 years or so, they were ruled by the Ottoman Empire. All of that is irrelevant to me, and especially in the United States of America, it's just kind of, like this was like the Putin logic that he opened his Tucker Carlson show with. There's something about, like who has historic claim over these different territories. I guess the British have historic claim over us, but we don't care because we wrote the Declaration of Independence and said, screw you, we're not doing it.
We did not write the Declaration of Independence. Did not get us away from the British. There was no document. There was no law. There was no body that voted on us to be able to get away from the British. That was done through war, to be clear. Okay, in case anybody missed that.
That anymore. We have rights. God gave them to us. But there's a bunch of stuff here that I want to talk about. So again, the question isn't whether they had a state or not. The question is that Israel has been militarily occupying these people. Now, in 1947, when the UN had their partition recommendation, they made a recommendation. The General Assembly had no authority whatsoever to just go around carving up countries and deciding who.
What do you mean? What do you think the mandate system was? Also, you say make a recommendation. That's kind of true. I mean, it was voted on and approved. I mean, this is what they recommended for partition. I mean, it's all the General Assembly, I mean, I guess can really do. 47 wasn't Security Council, right? Hold on. This is a big one. It's Resolution 181. Yeah, UN General Assembly.
The General Assembly had no authority whatsoever to just go around carving up countries and decide.
But there was no country there. I mean, who if not the UN, then who? I mean, what?
Whose territory was what? They made a recommendation, and then the Zionist settlers decided to violently enforce that. Now,
what a bizarre what? The United Nations, meaning the collective governing body of all the countries in the world, or assembly of all the countries in the world, all of them collectively voted in favor. The Jewish people accepted this. The Arabs didn't. Now, whether they were right to or wrong to, or who had authority to do what, or morally who was in the right, it's all up for debate. But to say that like the Zionists violently enforced it, I mean, like there were two different peoples there that were having conflict over like who got to live on the land. Like everybody was violently enforcing. And also when 47 failed, when that partition plan failed, the violence started on the Arab side.
Recommendation. And then the Zionist settlers decided to violently enforce that. Now,
that was after the Arabs decided to try to kick them off of the continent. We're missing a really key moment in history there.
Now, obviously, the Palestinians rejected it, and for very legitimate reasons. In hindsight, maybe it would have been better if they accepted that, maybe not. However, they were granted 54% of the land.
Oh, and then this stupid talking point.
And in this recommendation.
And no, it wasn't 54% of the land. I think it was 45% of the land, and the Jews were given 55%. He's mixing the numbers up, but it's a stupid talking point no matter what.
After the war in 1948, they took 78% of the land.
Oh, he meant the Jews. Sorry.
Be not. However, they were granted 54% of the land in this recommendation.
That's right. The Jews were granted this. Although, to be fair, that would have been with a 45% of their population being Arab, but...
After the war in 1948, they took 78% of the land.
After the war,
After the war in 1967, they took 100% of it. What every single peace proposal has been based around, going all the way back to the first Camp David, through the Oslo Accords, through Camp David in 2000, to every time there's been a serious negotiation about a two-state solution, it's always been that last 22%. You're talking about Gaza and the West Bank. No one, aside from what some dumb college student might be hollering or what someone on Twitter might say, there has never been a serious conversation about from the river to the sea, about the Palestinians actually get, even the right of return stuff is always whittled down to like a very small number of Palestinians who could maybe come back to where they used to live. But we're talking about the final 22% that Israel has absolutely no claim to. No claim.
That's what Hamas and Mahmoud Abbas believe. From the river to the sea. That's what Israel's fighting. I'm sorry, I just want a clarification. Yeah,
okay, 1 second. Hamas has actually, in the past, said they recognize Israel under 1967 borders. That may not be what they're saying right now at the moment, but just to be clear, they have said that before. I'm not just talking about the dreams of some terrorist group that can never come true. You know, Osama bin Laden also wanted worldwide Sharia law. That wasn't probably going to happen, though, okay? So anyway, this is what's been going on in every single negotiation. The entire global community, including every single United States president of my lifetime,
He's not going to say that their General Assembly resolutions matter when Resolution 181 and 47 didn't matter, is he?
That Israel has no claim to that last 22%. It is not theirs. It's not theirs to give. It ought not be their decision whether the Palestinians get a state or not. It's not their territory. That's why they're the occupying force. Now,
it's not really true, but it's more complicated than that. But I don't care. Ugh, how long? I'm done streaming 30 minutes.
Now, I just want to mention, because this is something that I know the pro-Israel side always loves to brag about, that, well, we disengaged with Gaza in 2005. A little interesting note about that very rarely comes up, is that Benjamin Netanyahu resigned over the disengagement. This was in Sharon's government, and he resigned over it because he was so against it. So, by the way, the guy who's in there now, the longest-serving prime minister in Israeli history, resigned over this disengagement.
Well, because it worked out so well, Dave, in the long run, to disengage?
No, he resigned when they did it.
Yeah.
Hold on. Who had to answer for voting in favor of disengagement? I feel like there's a politician. I feel like there's a right-wing one. I don't know who it was. Does anybody know who I'm thinking of? Or was it voting for something else? For disengagement, 2005. I thought, Oh, he did. Netanyahu. I'll just read this. Okay, sorry, because I'd heard that that Netanyahu had to answer for this. I think I heard this while I was in Israel. People talked about this domestic politics. An immediate consequence of Israel's disengagement from Gaza was Benjamin Netanyahu's August 7th resignation as finance minister, making a Likud party leadership challenge between him and Ariel Sharon virtually inevitable. What will be the impact of such a challenge on Sharon's policy in the post-disengagement period? And how would a Netanyahu challenge affect the chances of a split within the Likud, and perhaps a broader realignment of Israeli politics? Netanyahu's resignation and disengagement. Netanyahu resigned during the August 7th cabinet meeting, saying afterwards that he believed Gaza disengagement would create a base for terror, a policy with which he could no longer associate himself. He also opposed the unilateral nature of the withdrawal, saying reciprocity is better for Israel. Sharon charged Netanyahu with flip-flopping from his earlier support. Indeed, Netanyahu voted 4 times for disengagement, twice in the cabinet on June 6, 2004, and February 20, 2005, and twice in the Knesset on October 26, 2004, and February 16, 2005. He was absent on the Knesset in the vote held on July 20, 2005. I think Netanyahu supported it up through when it happened, right? Am I wrong on that? Because I thought that was something that Netanyahu would get challenged with, was his initial support for the disengagement and his voting for it. Am I wrong on that? Because somebody, is there... He's disassociating himself from disengagement now in order to challenge Sharon for the Likud leadership later. And the immediate after the resignation, I would trounce Sharon. Okay. I don't think Sharon ever voted against, or I'm sorry, I don't think Netanyahu ever voted against disengagement. He didn't like it afterwards. But it was like a political issue between him and Sharon.
So well, Dave, in the long run?
No. Is that Benjamin, what always loves to brag about that. Well, we disengaged with Gaza in 2005. A little interesting note about that very rarely comes up is that Benjamin Netanyahu resigned over the disengagement. This was in Sharon's government, and he resigned over it because he was so against it. So, by the way, the guy who's in there now, the longest-serving prime minister in Israeli history, resigned over this disengagement.
Well, does it work?
Yeah, but it was probably, one was to challenge Sharon's leadership, and 2 was in response to the unilateral nature in which it occurred, and that the results afterwards, I don't think were very good. But I don't know what the point of bringing this up is, unless he's trying to say, well, I know what's happening, I think. Dave Smith probably mistakenly thinks that Netanyahu was opposed to it from the beginning, I guess, or
worked out so well, Dave, in the long run.
No.
To disengage.
He resigned when they did it.
Yeah, he was against doing it. He was. And how did it work out to disengage from Gaza for Israel's security?
Hold on. Why do you think they did it?
What's that?
Why did they do it?
Why did they disengage from Gaza?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They pulled out 8,000 people from Gaza because it wasn't worth the protection of that settlement to give an experiment in good faith and goodwill to see if a Palestinian state could be created.
Okay, let me read you a quote.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is Doug Weissglass, who was the senior advisor to Sharon and his government when they pulled out of Gaza. Here's why they did it. Quote, "The significance of the disengagement plan is the freezing of the peace process."
I don't like this interpretation. Is he reading the quote from Wikipedia? I know he's not doing that after calling me a Wikipedia Andy, is he? Is this the one that's block quoted there? It is. Okay. That's where he got this from.
Quote, "The significance of the disengagement plan is the freezing of the peace process. And when you freeze that process, you prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. And you prevent a discussion on the refugees, the borders, Jerusalem, effectively the whole package called the Palestinian state, with all that it entails, has been removed indefinitely from our agenda. And all of this with authority and permission, all with a presidential blessing and the ratification of both houses of Congress." Of course, he's speaking about our government, not the Israeli government. I continue with the quote. "The disengagement is actually formaldehyde. It supplies the amount of formaldehyde that is necessary so that there will not be a political process with the Palestinians. The disengagement plan makes it possible for Israel to part conveniently in an..."
Oh, you got more of the second part of the quote, I guess. Good job.
"Interim situation that distances us as far as possible from political pressure. It legitimizes our contention that there is no negotiating with the Palestinians."
my understanding at the time, again, domestic politics is a little bit weaker for me, but my understanding at the time is I believe that Ariel Sharon said that he would never do anything to get rid of the settlements. He's a huge defender of the settlements. Sharon was a right-wing politician. And then I think Sharon basically realized, like, this is fucked. Gaza is fucked. We can't do this. This is an untenable position. But of course, when he's trying to sell this to his party, he's not going to come out and say, guys, listen, we just can't defend settlements. Of course, he's looking for the upside here. Obviously, this is a politician's, there's an advisor's statement in a political environment. Like, listen, guys, hold on. You're saying that pulling out of Gaza is bad, but look, the West is going to sign off on us basically being in the West Bank. That's good. And now, we're fucking over the Palestinians by getting that recognition, and we don't really need Gaza that much. But I think the reality was him disengaging from the Gaza Strip was looked upon pretty disfavorably. People weren't very happy about that. I'm pretty sure that there are there videos of it? I read accounts of like soldiers, IDF soldiers had to fucking fight Israeli settlers that were in the Gaza Strip to pull them out, to basically remove them. People were not happy about this. But to read this like politician statement and be like, oh, well, look, it was, yeah, obviously they're looking for the upsides on this. Can you confirm if he just conjoined two quotes or not? I don't know where he's going to second part of his quote from, but
Israel depart conveniently in an interim situation that distances us as far as possible from political pressure. It legitimizes our contention that there is no negotiating with the Palestinians. You mentioned that they pulled out 8,000 settlers, or so. I think it was a little bit more than that, 8,500.
This is a very subjective interpretation. Regardless, they didn't disengage to give Palestinians a chance to govern themselves. No, I think Sharon disengaged because he saw that it was fucked and that them occupying it was just a fucked situation, and it just wasn't, nothing good was going to happen to Israel. So they were like, fuck it, we pull out. It wasn't so much of like, we want Palestinians to be free and prosperous and peaceful on their own. It was more just like, fuck this, you deal with it, we're out. We're outie, I think was essentially the idea. It's my understanding of his political understanding at the time.
Something in that ballpark. That same year,
and the graves.
Hold on, that same year they put 15,000 in the West Bank. So this was never. And now, by the way, they also, they pulled the IDF forces out of Gaza and put them all on the perimeter.
Okay.
They still controlled the amount of food, the amount of construction supplies, the amount of medical supplies that could come in. They control the airspace, the sea space. This is why all the international human rights organizations all say the occupation never ended. Well, in fact, life actually got worse for the people living in Gaza. But just to be very clear, the Israelis were very explicit in their own words. They did this to dead the peace process, But
who cares why they did it? They pulled out. That's all that matters, right? Like, going by this quote, the Wikipedia quote that's oftentimes cited, like, who cares why they pulled out? Like, that's like saying, like, we pulled out because we knew they would elect a terrorist government. And look, they elected a terrorist government. See, it's Israel's fault. What? Like, nothing forced anything to happen. Nothing forced, like, Hamas to take over after the disengagement. Like,
they had agreed to see through, because the Americans, as well as the entire global community, was like, you got to stop eventually. Well, okay. You can't just occupy these people forever.
You just did something inadvertently I can't let you get away with when you read me a quote of one person and then said, the Israelis did this. There were a lot of people that were for the disengagement because they genuinely believed that if we cede land to the Palestinians to give their own right to attempt to self-determine and form a state, then we will get more peace. And every attempt Israel has made to do that has led to more bloodshed and terrorism against Israel following Oslo Accords, Second Intifada. And as we've seen now, what happened in the last 18 years in Gaza, you cannot blame Israel for... Wait, I didn't interrupt. You cannot blame Israel.
You did, but okay, keep going.
Once. I gave you one. I'll give you one. You cannot blame Israel for a culture that is bred within Gaza, raising children every day in kindergarten, as young as kindergarten, that they should aspire to become shaheeds and martyrs, and they should live the day that they can go into an Israeli cafe in Tel Aviv and blow themselves up. That is what they've been doing. That you cannot blame Israel for all the international aid that's come into Gaza, that instead of being used to invest in infrastructure and build up a prosperous state alongside Israel, instead we're investing in terrorist tunnels, terrorist activities, and destroying.
The motivation to why they pulled out was to create harsher conditions in the area, you clown. How? How would it create harsher conditions in the area? What are you talking about? Why would Israel pulling out of the Gaza Strip create harsher conditions? Nobody forces all the money to go to tunnels. Nobody forces Hamas to, invest everything in shooting rockets at Israel all day. No external force is happening there. No external pressure is causing that to happen.
Any chance of an actual free, prosperous society. You can't blame Israel for wanting to secure its border. And you can understand why they would be cautious when pulling out of Gaza. And look.
Regarding 2005 withdrawal, check this out at 37 minutes. What is this? Oh, it's the force removal. This is when Sharon's government decided to remove all of the Israeli settlers from the Gaza Strip, or the Israeli citizens, whatever the fuck you want to call them. Basically, there was, in the West Bank, you've got settlements. Well, in the Gaza Strip, there were also Jewish settlements. And Sharon was like, fuck this, and decided to just wipe them because he's like, this is fucked. And it's fucking us over, and we got to get the fuck out of here. I think Sharon might have also wanted to remove the West Bank settlements too, but there's no way he would have had support for that. Because I think Sharon saw the settlements as like the destruction of Israel. That it's untenable. The demographics are impossible to shore up, and it's just going to destroy the country, which is maybe correct. Okay.
Look at what happened 18 years later. I think you're always starting the story in the middle. You're saying, well, they pulled out and they were cautious in securing the border and monitoring things, and that's what caused the terrorism. No, they were monitoring things because they were smuggling rockets into Israel in order to attack them, and using all the aid and materials to build rockets and weapons to constantly attack and deliberately attack Israeli civilians. Every rocket fired at Israel is indiscriminate and with the intention of killing Israelis and maximizing civilian casualties. And so I think there's like this moral equivalency that's being done is really disturbing to me, in the sense that Israel is not doing those things, even though there's a disproportionate in terms of the numbers. We can specify, we can get into those details. But the point is, the disengagement. There may have been politicians who said, "Oh, this will cause this will do this. We can benefit from this in such and such way." But you're taking all the agency away from the actual terrorist regimes that took over and sought to destroy Israel, as explicitly stated in their charter. How can Israel be called the one who's...
Was Sharon's decision a good one in hindsight? Absolutely it was. It was a good decision. Regardless of what Israelis think, it was a good decision. The only bad part about the decision was he didn't get to pull out of the West Bank too. He should have been full GigaChat, and he should have axed all of the deep settlements, your Ariels or whatever, all that shit. He should have axed the deep settlements. He should have fucking he should have unilaterally like annexed the big blocks. Maybe East Jerusalem if you really want to be a fucking dick, and then fucking abandon every other fucking settler in the West Bank. That's what he should have done. He should have said, fuck it. We're out. Good luck. International community can figure it out, and been done.
Doesn't have the moral high ground here when they're fighting against regimes that took over with the...
That quote wasn't Netanyahu. It was Dov Weisglass. Yeah, I know. We read that from him. Did he say it was from Netanyahu? I don't think he said it was. He said it was from Weisglass.
Explicit goal of wiping out Israel and all of the Jews. I don't care what they said something in 67 is some kind of tactic to try to get more pressure off of them, but they benefit from this kind of apologist for what they're doing. I think for saying that it's all Israel. It's all Israel's responsibility. This occupation is perpetuated simply because of Israel. It's perpetuated because of Israeli security needs. That's why it's perpetuated.
Okay, you're doing a lot of arguing with straw men here and not anything that I actually said. So number one, I didn't pick a quote from some random Israeli. I picked a quote from Sharon's senior advisor explaining why they embarked on the policy that they did. He didn't say, this is what I like about the disengagement plan. He said, this is the purpose of the disengagement plan. I'm sorry if you had, I don't know, Paul Wolfowitz on record telling you this is why the George W. Bush administration did something. That's not the same thing as just like some guy in Kansas said it. I didn't just pick some random Israeli. I picked a senior member of the government as they were doing this, telling you what the policy was about. And in terms of this, like, a lot of these are like the buzzwords that I hear in these debates. Moral equivalency. I never said they were the same. In fact, I think Israel's done much worse to the Palestinians than the Palestinians have done to the Israelis. So I'm not saying they're the same at all. And in terms of well, you can react. It's kind of an objective fact. But look,
intention.
What's it? Like, it doesn't really matter why they disengage, though. Who cares what the motivation is? Like, how does that dictate what the Palestinian action should be?
Israel's done much worse to the Palestinians than the Palestinians have done to the Israelis. So I'm not saying they're the same.
Oh, he's just going to go by kill count. He's going to go by body count. That's it.
Same at all. And in terms of well, you can react. It's kind of an objective fact. But look,
intention when evaluating morality matters a ton. I mean, if I'm driving,
but you're just assuming what the intention is. I'm reading you their words of what their intentions are.
But Dave, if I'm driving in my car and I accidentally lose control of the car, the brakes go out and I kill 10 people. Versus if I'm driving my car and I see one person and I deliberately run over them, the latter case is a much worse human being deserving of condemnation, even though in the first case more people died. And I think people look at numbers and they say Israel must be the bad guy here because of
but this is so disanalogous. I mean, like, yes, obviously there's a difference between vehicular manslaughter and first-degree murder. However,
and self-defense and murder, I would say, is a difference.
And self-defense. Listen, this is all the stuff. It's like, look, self-defense. Just to be very clear about this here, okay, to break down kind of these terms. If somebody broke into my house and points a gun at me, and I shoot and kill that person, I can say, hey, I acted in self-defense. This guy was threatening me.
Right.
Nobody would argue if an IDF soldier shot one of the Hamas militants on October 7th in Israel. No one would be sitting here going like, oh my God, how could Israel do that? That would be legit self-defense.
Don't say nobody, but
now, hold on. Let me just finish my point here. Now, if nobody, I think, is pretty fair on that, but whatever. Anyway, if someone broke into my house, kills a family member of mine, and then runs out into the world, and I go, I got to go get that guy because of I have to defend myself. Now, that I might have a right to go get that guy, But that's not self-defense. That's not what self-defense is. That would be justice. That would be revenge.
What if he
but
keeps
it's
firing
not
at
what, Yeah, let me just finish my point, okay? Because you just told me to not interrupt you. So what we're talking about now, even if you're just talking about Israel going and getting the people responsible for October 7th, that's not self-defense. You can call it justice, you can call it revenge, but it's something else. Now, if that person who just came over in my house and killed one of my family members goes back to his house, and I know that his kids, his wife, his aunt, his grandma are all in there, and I say, I'm going to blow up the house and kill all of them because I want to get that one guy who came over here and killed somebody, I have committed not vehicular manslaughter, but murder in the first degree. Cold-blooded murder, okay? So I'm just saying...
It's just weird to use like murder in the like legal terms when like there's international ways to understand, like we have laws around conflict we can use to understand these actions, but I mean, we can also meme it up, I guess, if we want.
I know things are a little bit different when we're talking about different countries, even though Gaza is not exactly a country. But I'm just saying, invoking self-defense to justify what is actually murder in the first degree is just pure trickery. Like, that's not a real comment on what's going on.
I think
You're
it
not
is.
dealing
I can
with
explain
anyone's
it.
real objection. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I would say you're stopping the continuation of things. It's not just going into the house. And this really boils down to, a lot of this conversation boils down to the morality of war to begin with, because it's not just a bunch of random individuals fighting. We have governments that have a responsibility to seek out justice and defend their citizens. And I would say it's not just somebody committing a violent act against you, but threatening to do so over and over again. And under that duress, a threat of violence is just as justified to defend yourself as actual violence in real time. Would you agree to that?
No, not necessarily.
If I put a gun up and I say, I'm going to shoot you, and I'm going to keep doing it, you have a right to defend yourself.
Right, but if a homeless guy on the street goes, I'm going to kill you and your whole family, and I just murder that guy, you'd be like, no, that's not justified. Just
This argument works on October 6th. Like, oh, well, they can't do anything. Look at the Iron Dome. But I mean, like, afterwards, there's a whole bunch of people in Israel that were saying, like, oh my God, these Palestinians are going to fucking kill us. There's going to be some crazy shit. Whose feelings about that were vindicated on October 7th. So, I mean, you got to be careful with this.
Because he made some threat that he has no ability to follow through on. Right. And so, like, no, it's not.
I understand that, but I'm just, to continue my point, it's not that they just commit this act and then go back to their business. If they stay in that family's house, outfit the windows of that house so that they can successfully shoot RPGs at soldiers trying to do special operations and trying to gather intelligence, and they use these houses and create military installations out of these homes, then you do have the right to that.
Why do we have to, can we just like talk about what's happening? Why do we even need the analogy at this point? Like, Jesus.
It's self-defense.
Wow, Brian, thanks for the 10 gifted memberships.
And blaming Hamas for putting these people in harm's way, for implicating themselves and embedding themselves and exploiting that asymmetry. And Israel makes efforts to minimize civilian casualties, but it's not accountable to Israel to do that when it is fighting a war of defense.
First off, that does not describe the vast majority of the cases of people being killed in Gaza. But okay, in that hypothetical, I think the way you put it is an interesting one. They're exploiting that asymmetry.
Yes.
That's right, because this is an asymmetrical war. Okay, do you think Israel exploits the asymmetry at all? Do you think they exploit the fact that they have? That's
not what asymmetrical connotates. Asymmetrical doesn't just connotate like small power versus big power generally. Well, at least that's not how I've seen it used when people are talking about armed conflict. Asymmetrical usually connotates like a whole bunch of different types of tactics and strategies used to exploit a civilian population again, or non-standard forms of warfare against a more traditional nation or a traditional state with a traditional military. Usually. Let's see what the wiki says on that one. Maybe it just means like small versus big. Asymmetric warfare is a type of war between belligerents whose relative military power strategy or tactics differ significantly. This type of warfare often not necessarily involves insurgents or resistant movement militias who may have the status of unlawful combatants against a standing army. Yeah, asymmetrical warfare means more than just like big versus small. Like there's a connotation of a bunch of different types of tactics and strategies involved in order to make use of your relative weakness or relative strength.
I think the way you put it is an interesting one. They're exploiting that asymmetry.
Yes.
That's right, because this is an asymmetrical war, okay? Do you think Israel exploits the asymmetry at all? Do you think they exploit the fact that they have way more power than the Palestinians?
Dave, Israel, in terms of this claims about genocide and being leveled at Israel, which I think is a smear, just think about it this way. Israel could level the place tomorrow. They could have done it on October 8th and 9th and level the entire country. They could do it, but they won't do it. And Hamas can't do it, but they would do it. If they had the military capacity, they would kill every Israeli tomorrow. Do you not agree with that?
Okay, so I just want to jump in here because I do want to ask a question about that, because I have shown aerial footage. There have been Doctors Without Borders that have gone there, that have worked in tons of war zones and have written pieces saying that this is not a regular war. Like, it looks like they are raising the place. And when I see, again, of course, someone will always say that's propaganda here, but when I look at it, it does sort of look like they're they want these buildings fully collapsed. And then
how do you explain the death toll then, right? Like if Israel really truly just wanted to kill as many people as possible, how is it that we're how many months in and did we get back to 30,000 after we knocked off 12,000 unconfirmed deaths? Like how is the number that when 2 million people are in such a small area? Like shouldn't the number dead be so much higher if Israel's goal is truly to just like destroy and kill everybody and blow everything up?
It's not helpful to the pro-Israel side when Jared Kushner jumps up and talks about how profitable the property would be. And so I do want to jump into kind of what Israelis are currently protesting. I actually got a phone call today from an Israeli newspaper who was saying we would like a comment from Candace because the Israelis are believing that some of this was a false flag. He had interviewed some Israelis on the ground, and they think that, you know, there's a larger plan that's at bay. Now, that sounds crazy unless you read the Jerusalem Post article, which came out earlier this week. I covered it on my show, where they are saying that there is no question that the Israeli government knew that Hamas was going to kidnap 250 people. I want to read it to you verbatim here because I don't want to misquote the Jerusalem Post. Obviously, none of us would say the Jerusalem Post is anti-Israel.
Saying that somebody had, also, I like how she's like, well, of course they can't be anti-Israel. They have Jerusalem in the name. Of course, nobody would accuse. Saying that intelligence was ignored or there was sloppy work or whatever by the military is one thing. It's much further to say false flag. Those are two very far apart claims. Now, maybe this is evidence for a false flag if you want to say that, but these are very far apart claims. But
or anti-Semitic. The headline read, the IDF knew of Hamas's plans to kidnap 250 before October 7th attack. The IDF had precise information about Hamas's intentions, but due to prevailing conceptions in the security establishment and possible negligence by officials, the warning signs were not acted on. Now you can go ahead, you can read that article, guys. We'll drop it in the link. And I do want to say, this is kind of gets into what Charlie Kirk was saying instantly about any of us who have been to Israel. Just like it's a very long time for them not to respond. I've been to Israel, you've been to Israel. It's very small, and it feels like there's a military presence every 5 feet. It's actually scary going into the country. They're so secure. You see women holding, massive guns pointing down at you in the airport. And so people were questioning whether or not they allowed this attack to go on, and they had this intelligence, and they wanted it to go on for larger regions.
How many soldiers would have to be in on that the attack was being... Also, keep in mind, soldiers, everybody has to serve in the IDF. These are your ordinary citizens, and not just any citizens. They're Jews, Jewish people that are here for a Jewish state, that are all roped into their singular nation trying to, stand against the world. How many soldiers would have to be involved in, like, stand down, don't go, make sure whatever you do, don't go south, let them kill, let them murder as many civilians as possible before we get, like... That's... The fact that no evidence has emerged for that, despite how many people would need to be involved in that would be wild.
Additionally, we know that Egypt said that they had handed Israel a report.
What is she implying? That Israel let it happen and let thousands of people be killed and wounded and somehow covered the entire thing up? Yes, that is what she's implying. She'll never say it outright because she always just jacks off, but that is exactly what she's implying.
Intelligence, and they wanted it to go on for larger regions. Additionally, we know that Egypt said that they had handed Israel a report and told them that there was something that was being planned. Ami, do you look at that and say, well, that's all a conspiracy and that's crazy, or do you think that's interesting? I just like to hear your feedback on that.
What I would say to that is obviously everybody on the pro-Israel side especially wants a full investigation as to how something like this could have happened. The fundamental obligation of any government, first and foremost, before any other policy, and we all would agree here, is to protect its citizens, and everybody acknowledges that security failure. To infer this nefarious incendiary reason, to me, sounds very much like 9/11 truthers saying, hey, there was a lot of money to be made from the Iraq war, and we needed a reason to go in, so let's just let the planes hit the towers, and it's not really Saudi Arabia, and it's not really the hijackers, it was an inside job. Yeah. So to me, it has as much credibility. Upon hearing it for the first time from you here, that idea sounds about as credible as a 9/11 truther conspiracy.
Yeah, sorry, I should add more here because the article was a bit longer. I didn't realize this was the first time you were hearing it because it did just come out yesterday, so that makes total sense. It's that they actually have the document. So a newly surfaced document has revealed, and this is the reason why the Israelis are protesting, has revealed that the IDF and the intelligence systems had detailed knowledge of Hamas's plan to raid Israel and kidnap 250 people weeks before the October 7th massacre. The document, which was compiled in the Gaza division, outlined Hamas's intentions and was known to top intelligence officials, according to a report by Can News. And then it goes into further detail. So I think, and by the way, quite ironically, 9/11, there were a lot of questions as well. USS Liberty, and
she just throws every fucking conspiracy. The USS Liberty was, I think it was an American recon ship or research vessel or some shit that got attacked in the Mediterranean in the Six-Day War. And Nazis like Nick will tell you that the USS Liberty was attacked. What is the Nazi conspiracy theory? That it was attacked intentionally to draw the U.S. into the war or something? Or I don't even know but it's some thing like that. I don't know why she would even bring this up. I don't know how that just slipped out of her mouth. She just randomly started conspiracy shitting
quite ironically, 9/11, there were a lot of questions as well, USS Liberty. And I just so you know where I stand on this, I do not think that false flag attacks are impossible. In fact, I know they're not impossible because of the CIA declassified documents pertaining to Operation Northwoods.
Yeah. It's like every meme. It's every single meme.
JFK's refusal to allow them to stage a false flag attack of the CIA on American soil to go to war with Cuba.
Oh shit! Does she think the CIA? Oh wait, isn't there a theory that like the CIA killed JFK because he basically thumbs that plan down? Is that a meme? Do people believe this? Does she believe this?
So if we accept that intelligence agencies, and I'm referring to America now, have attempted those things in the past, and now they have documents alleging that they absolutely knew something. Now, they could have been negligent. That's entirely plausible. I do think, given a lot of the rhetoric, and I personally don't think Bibi Netanyahu is a good person. I do think he's quite nefarious, given statements he's made in the past, and he's been caught on camera talking about, don't worry about America, and we're going to do this to the Palestinians, turn the cameras off. I just don't see him as a good guy, and I think that that's what a lot of people are questioning. Like, why do Jewish Americans feel like they have to defend this guy simply because he's the leader of Israel? There are always bad leaders. I wouldn't defend Joe Biden against crazy stuff.
Understood.
You know what I mean?
I think it's important to make those distinctions. I would simply say that, someone I think we all like, Thomas Sowell, is always asking when you're evaluating things, compared to what? It's not like I can stand by everything Bibi Netanyahu said or would defend him, and not everyone should, but compared to what? When we're looking at the situation, the leadership of the opponents and the enemies of Israel have said far, far, far worse, more disgusting, more genocidal things than I think anyone in Israel has ever said. And it's evidenced by the fact that you don't see the same kinds of... You don't see IDF going in to a Palestinian home, dragging a body through the streets of Tel Aviv to mobs of cheering crowds. And I will say also, just as a point, that as we got into the weeds of the military actions here and what's justified in our discussion before, Dave, about self-defense, I know that argument from authority, everyone should be able to talk about anything. But it's to approach this topic with humility as we all sit here comfortably in armchairs in the West, commenting on our microphones and on our podcasts, as if we're military tacticians knowing exactly how to conduct a war. If we all accept the fact that war is horrible and war is tragic and war is ugly, like even the just war, if you agree that there are wars that are just, and you're never going to not have civilian casualties and collateral damage, not saying those terms as just buzzwords and just ways to evade responsibility and accountability, but we accept that in reality, war is hell and war is tragic, and you do the best you can, but I
don't even know how this is responding to what she said at all. I don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
I just think it's really, I always find it really frustrating, and it's kind of just rich to see people, all of us, everybody kind of commenting on this as if they know, if Israel's just in responding to October 7th, we can tell them, not the IDF, not the military experts on this who are trying to conduct this war, we know best how they should do it. And what that manifests in ultimately is, soldiers 19 and 20-year-old Israeli soldiers sitting in a booby-trapped building in Gaza waiting to be killed because the rules of engagement in Israel are so strict, and they have to go through so many channels before they actually execute operations. And then we get reports back of dead soldiers who were blown up, who were killed because they couldn't execute properly, effectively, because they were restricted by rules of engagement that Israel imposes upon itself. You would never hear that from the Hamas side. You would never hear the Hamas issuing an apology for a rocket that landed in the wrong place, or Hamas getting up and saying, we're launching an investigation to find out what went wrong here. And Dave, I know you're not defending that, and I'm not trying to just make points past you. I'm pointing out that, to me, it's a point of confusion as to why not more people see it that way.
If you only look at things from one side's perspective, and of course that is the more powerful, the more wealthy, the ones who are doing more of the killing. If you just look at it from their perspective, that's true. You could just as easily say, hey, we're all sitting here in America talking to our microphones. What do you know what it's like to be lived in a blockaded, occupied territory where you just got to accept that your grandmother was just, killed in some drone strike, or that your kids just got their limbs blown off? Maybe you got to join Hamas. What do you know about the rules of engagement? Maybe you got to go over there and kill whoever you can. I mean, you could play this on either side. Let me just say a few things, because there's just been a lot here. So number one, I did read this piece in the Jerusalem Post, and I will say I'm not a conspiracy theorist on this. I think that the most likely explanation, although I'm not ruling anything out, I mean, there's definitely
is Israeli hubris, and there's precedent for it.
No question. There were wild, exaggerated claims made about October 7th that were just not true and were not founded. The atrocities were horrific enough. There was really no need.
Oh, he's one of the doesn't believe in the rape thing, probably. Sounds like it.
For it.
Or is he just going to say just the 40 beheaded babies? I wonder if he'll specify what he means by that.
October 7th that were just not true and were not founded. The atrocities were horrific enough. There was really no need for it, but there were a lot of claims that were made that just turned out to not be true at all. There is no question that Benjamin Netanyahu is desperate to keep this war going as long as he can, because whenever the music runs out, he's the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history, and his entire doctrine was, I'm going to do this and thwart a Palestinian state so that we can protect our people, and it culminated in October 7th. So I wouldn't say...
I don't think that's his entire doctrine. I don't know if anybody in Israel even believes what he just said. I thought the big meme was that he's trying to keep the war going to head off his corruption cases that are being investigated that actually look pretty bad. The ones where he was like, basically... Fuck, what were there were like publications where he was getting like stories killed, like negative stories about him killed. They were like pretty big meme investigations. Big meme, not like meme like they weren't serious. I thought that was the general feeling from like an average Israeli. Not that he's trying to destroy the Palestinians, but that he's trying to save his own future legally and avoid prison, basically. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I didn't talk to everybody.
So that we can protect our people, and it culminated in October 7th. So I wouldn't say nobody doesn't want a real investigation of October 7th, but there's a reason why we haven't had that yet. But I don't know if...
The October 7th thing is always going to be fucked. He did run as a security candidate too, and that there's no way to come back from October 7th. You fucked up. Clearly you fucked up. Clearly you got super fucked up. There's no way you ever come back from that.
Any of you guys ever heard... In fact, I think I might have brought this up when I was on your old show, Candace, with my first and I'm guessing last appearance on a Daily Wire show. But I made this point that there's a hot mic or like a secret recording of John Kerry that you can listen to from back when he was Secretary of State. And he was talking about the rise of ISIS in Syria, which, of course, for people who know about this, the Obama administration had a brilliant plan of arming all of the anti-Assad rebels to have another regime change there in Syria. And this is why ISIS was driving around in Toyota trucks as they were.
Wait, hold on, I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time. Did ISIS get weapons from any U.S.-backed things? I thought that when the U.S. was trying to ship weapons through Syria, which I think we did, I think we were generally trying to arm the anti-Assad people that were aligned with the FSA, the Free Syrian Army. I don't remember any stories of the U.S. arming ISIS. I thought we were trying to arm... there were a lot of groups. There were a lot of groups that were opposing Assad. I wonder if it's listed on Wikipedia. If you look like Syrian Civil War Wikipedia, if it shows you the breakdown of... Fuck. There were so many different like splinter groups. Al-Qaeda, I think, was involved even, among other. I mean, that's a name you recognize. But I think usually that's who people criticize. Oh, we armed Al-Qaeda again, because they might have been fighting on the side of the FSA, I think, against ISIS. If you wanted to say the U.S. armed ISIS, then I think that the argument there was usually stuff that was abandoned in Iraq, that the Iraqi army wasn't trained well enough, and that when Baghdadi, I think, went over to Iraq and started to recruit there, they were able to procure a bunch of older U.S. weapons. But the idea that we had the bright idea to arm ISIS, I've never heard that before, ever. Could be true, and I didn't read as much back then, but I've never heard that claim ever. Never saw that in any of my reading, any of my research ever at all.
Show, Candace, with my first and I'm guessing last appearance on a Daily Wire show. But I made this point that there's a hot mic or like a secret recording of John Kerry that you can listen to from back when he was Secretary of State. And he was talking about the rise of ISIS in Syria, which, of course, for people who know about this, the Obama administration had a brilliant plan of arming all of the anti-Assad rebels.
That doesn't just mean ISIS. There were lots of different factions that were fighting in Syria throughout that civil war.
To have another regime change there in Syria. And this is why ISIS was driving around in Toyota trucks as they were taking over parts of Syria and parts of Iraq. And John Kerry...
I don't know if that just doesn't... I don't believe it. I don't believe he knows anything about the Civil War. But I don't know.
Kerry is talking very candidly about this. And if you remember, this is around the time when Obama called them the JV.
Wait. So wait, does Kerry leaked tape talking Syria where he says they armed ISIS? Or... The failure of American bullshit is supposed to be defended. U.S. Wait. In leaked audio. But Kerry also expressed sympathy for the Syrians' demands that the United States intervene more forcefully amid Syrian and Russian airstrikes against civilians, telling the group that he lost the army for using military force against the regime. Comments came at the meeting. Cody Connors. Wait, why do I know that name? Cody Connors. Was he the old head of EG? Cody. I don't know why. Why do I recognize that name? He got banned because he got caught sexting a minor in the then existing Twitch Whispers product. He was trying to meet up with her at TwitchCon. The powers that B could read in plain text. Huh. That sounds, like something people might have heard before. I wonder if it's true or not. Who knows? I don't know. Okay. Wait. Arms supplied by U.S., Saudi, ended up with Islamic State, researchers say. This is in 2017. Said most Islamic State weapons were looted from the Iraqi and Syrian armies. Some were originally provided by other countries, mainly the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, to Syrian opposition groups fighting against President Bashar al-Assad. These findings stark counters the contradictions inherent supplying 12 cases of weaponry purchased by the United States that ended up in Islamic State's hand, either captured on the battlefield or acquired through shifting alliances within the Syrian opposition. Most of these items later ended up in Iraq. Yeah, I don't think that the United States was like necessarily supplying ISIS. I don't think we were ever supplying ISIS directly or even indirectly. They might have procured these weapons through other means, but I don't know. Okay.
This was while he was sending weapons and funds in that he knew was ending up in the hands of ISIS. And John Kerry says very blatantly, he goes, look, we saw the rise of ISIS, and we thought this will be great because this will put pressure on Assad to step...
I'm sorry. I need this. I'm sorry. Please, somebody link me this. What are we talking about here? John Kerry was in a leaked thing saying that he saw the rise of ISIS and he thought it was great? Hold on. John Kerry. I'm sorry. I have to Google again. John Kerry leaked. Here's the leaked audio. Okay, thank you. Let's listen. 36 minutes, bro. Is there a transcript? Do you find that if there's a topic that you debate for a long time, when new development or info comes out, you will easier come to the opinion that fits their side because it could give points to the other side? I try not to. Control F. Thank you. I don't need this. Holy shit, this website is fucking AIDS.
Okay, I don't know how to act as a diplomat. I fail horribly in that. I think a Nusra front is waiting us too big.
There was an enforcement mechanism right now. A lot of us have been fighting for one. But we don't have one right now, and that's...
Okay, let's see.
And we know Russia came in because they didn't want a Daesh government. And they supported Assad. And we know that this was growing. We were watching. We saw that Daesh was growing in strength, and we thought Assad was threatened. We thought, however, we could probably manage, that Assad might then negotiate. Instead of negotiating, you got Assad. Now you got Putin to support him. So it's truly complicated. I mean, you know how complicated it is. You live in it. But for us politically, where we have a Congress that will not authorize our use of force. Congress will not.
Nothing here is controversial. He's saying that they saw Daesh, which was ISIS, growing, and that they thought that they could negotiate with Assad, but then Russia stepped in to help. Putin stepped in to help to fight against ISIS, which he did. None of this is like supporting or funding ISIS or like loving ISIS, but
and we know that this was growing. We were watching.
Let me listen to that.
We saw that Daesh was growing in strength, and we thought Assad was threatened. We thought, however, we could probably manage, that Assad might then negotiate. Instead of negotiating, you got Assad. Now you got Putin to support him. So it's truly complicated. I mean, you know how complicated it is. You live in it. But for us politically, where we have a Congress that will not authorize our use of force. Congress will not pass that. And so we're trying to help the best way we can But we finally decided the best thing we can do is try to find a way to have a political solution where the opposition is part of the government. And you can have an election and let the people of Syria decide who do they want. You don't believe in an election?
Let's go and elect Hitler then. Yeah, I don't. I think that there is accountability to that person. He killed a million.
Why can't you have accountability at the ballot box?
And what?
Why can't you have an election run by the international community?
Which we don't trust already. Okay, then.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Okay,
if
so
the international community sets up an election under the strict...
Okay. Hi, baby. What's up? Oh, yeah. Somebody linked me if you wanted to see like a list of the groups that were fighting at one point in time. Jesus.
Step down because these guys are coming toward Damascus. What's he going to do now? You know, and so he's going to have to step down, and then we can put the government in that we want. But then they turned around and invaded.
We can put the government in that we want. He was just talking about holding a free and fair democratic elections. Do I need to go listen to that full call? Is anything that he's saying actually sourced from that call? What the fuck?
Iraq. That wasn't step down and then to step down because these guys are coming toward Damascus. What's he going to do now? You know, and so he's going to have to step down, and then we can put the government in that we want. But then they turned around and invaded Iraq. That wasn't part of the deal, you know, like it's just this tremendous hubris that you can prop up this terrorist organization and then use them in the way that you want them. And this is, I'm just saying, I know that for years, this was the Israeli attitude toward Hamas.
Okay, whatever.
Was the quote, "We can control the height of the flame," Benjamin Netanyahu said. He was propping up Hamas intentionally so that he could look to the rest of the world and say, hey, look, we got no partner for peace. Look, it's a terrorist group who's won there. He was literally just a week or 2 weeks, I think it was. Before
like, does he realize Hamas was voted for by the people, right? Like that came after a vote. Like,
or October 7th, he sent the head of Mossad into Qatar to make sure, because some of the funding to Hamas had slowed down, so he sent him in there to make sure the funding continued. This was his strategy. By the way, this has been acknowledged, again, by, we could go through a lot of quotes on this one, by all types of people at the top level of Israeli government. It's been reported on in the Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel, Haaretz, the New York Times, Washington Post. It's been widely reported on. But I think this was more likely what happened, that they totally underestimated Hamas's abilities. And they did not think at all that they could pull off something like October 7th. And it seemed from what I've read about it that even when they were getting this intelligence that was like, hey, they're planning something here. They're planning something big. It was like, yeah, they'll never pull that off. We don't even really have to worry about them. Israel has, for the last 20 years, been much more concerned about the threat of Hezbollah, much more concerned about the threat of Iran. They're totally downplayed Hamas as this little like punk gang that like couldn't do anything to them. So I'm just saying,
that's like kind of true. He's like right on that, but Jesus.
Is there a bigger conspiracy involved? It is possible. From everything I'm looking at, it seems pretty likely that that's just the easiest explanation, is that Benjamin Netanyahu had tremendous Dick Cheney-like hubris, thinking he could get away with doing whatever he wanted to. And this is why he was propping up Hamas for years. And it backfired.
That all to me starts the story in the middle, Dave, still, because at the end of the day, what's been Hamas's attitude towards Israel since its inception, and what's been Israel's enemies' attitude towards Israel since its founding in 40
I'm not on the side of Hamas. Hamas has a bad attitude, for sure.
And in perpetuating violent attacks and raising populations of people to hate the Jewish state and want to kill it, I mean, whatever political benefits one can operate in that scenario exists because it's a given, and by default, not having to do with any occupation, but they want to destroy all the Jews.
Asymmetry here, but don't you see the asymmetry in our arguments here? Is that I'm making a point. Listen, I'm not defending Hamas, but you are defending the government of Israel.
No.
So when I point out something,
by shielding accountability from Hamas in what's perpetuating this war, you're not defending their actions, but you're missing where the accountability lies.
No, okay. Again, I'm not defending Hamas. I'm not shielding them from accountability. But you are defending the government of Israel. So when I point to something that Israel's done horrifically wrong, that there's just like no excuse for, you immediately pivot to how bad Hamas is.
Only because
I agree. Hamas is...
Okay, I'm bored. Okay. Tomorrow we'll go through, I think, my next day's worth of Israeli stuff, and then we will go do other meme shit that's going on. I don't understand for the Dr. Disrespect stuff. I feel like I've heard for so long people say that they were worried about like potential lawsuits or whatever bullshit. I don't know why they ever felt that way. I'm not sure if there's like some other part to that story that I just didn't hear, but this story has been known since basically Dr. Disrespect got banned. I'm surprised that it's been under wraps for so long, considering I think about a year ago I started to hear about it from people that I wouldn't expect would keep those secrets, but yeah. I don't know. I feel like there's got to be more to it, but who knows? Yeah, I love you guys. It's been fun. Good luck. Ripperino, you're confirming this, or is it all secondhand? I don't know anything firsthand at all, but I've heard people that should know about it firsthand talk about this for years. Since he was first man, right? Yeah. You can't just say this and then go offline. Listen, it's not my story to tell, okay? Also, who the fuck knows? Who knows what's true or not? It wasn't any of my original investigating. Just stuff that I've heard for a long time, though. So who knows? Good luck. Ripper, cappuccino, 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 cappuccino. I'll catch you guys next. Stream right now.